There are already people who are leaving comments. See, Neal Isaacs says, "Merry Christmas Eve to all."
Neal's
Hey,
coming up
Neal, how are
later,
you?
isn't he?
He is coming up later. I'm going to go live on Instagram today too. So I have to do this manual thing. All right. So we're rolling. People are coming in. I'm going to put the intro reel on and then we're going to get going. I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses while controlling risk. So if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win. Hey everyone, and welcome to my fifth annual Christmas Eve live stream extravaganza. I'm so happy to be here today and kicking things off with Mike Finger, longtime friend of the show, frequent guest, past partner on a whole other podcast. In fact, Mike, I was talking about with someone the other day about yourexitsquad.com. I directed them to the website. So, people are still discovering those golden nuggets of content that you and I have put out there. How are you feeling about 2024? I mean, we're here at Christmas. We're at the end of the year. What's been happening with Mike this year?
Great year. Greetings to everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, all of the above. It was a great year, David. Interesting business owners to work with. Interesting macro environment for all of us to try to navigate. Great year, 24, excited about 25, and thrilled to be back on your Christmas Eve special.
Well, it's funny that you talk about the macro environment, because I think one of the biggest stories, of course, of the last maybe 2 years has been the whole rising interest rate thing.
Absolutely.
And here in Canada, anyway, we've had, now correct me if I'm wrong, if you're in the comments and I get this wrong, I think we've had 3 central bank interest rate cuts, and the 2 most recent ones were 50 basis points each, which is really in the realm of like, holy cow, Batman, economic emergency. And it's all relating to unemployment stats and some of the GDP figures. So I don't know if it's just that the sort of downturn that we're all kind of talking about and feeling is being recognized first here, but I think that's got to translate into some rate cuts at the U.S. Fed. I mean, what are you seeing when you talk to your clients about the macro economy going on?
It's been an interesting season for that. We obviously came to election season finally this November. That seems to create, and I can give you qualitative information.
And, right? And I notice now all the November economic numbers are being revised. Funny how that is.
It's a perception question, right? There are some clients that I work with that believe the perceived changes that are coming are going to be good for their business. Some believe they're going to be bad for their business. Some have no freaking clue what's going to happen. So I guess what I would observe is that the uncertainty period that I think a lot of people hoped would end with the election seems to be continuing. And it's one of the questions I wanted to pose to you, David. We hear the T word here frequently, and I know you're hearing it north of the border. Tell me what tariffs mean for the Canadian economy and how the small business owners that you work with are going to be impacted.
Oh, you see, when you said T word, I thought you were talking about taxes, and I was going to say you don't know anything about taxes down there. Tariffs. So it's very interesting because I think that Donald Trump's comments, his statement that he wants to put a 25% tariff because of border controls and stuff, it sparked some very interesting debate and conversation up here. And some of the conversation has been around, does he have a point? Is there a problem with border security? Right. So there's all this kinds of stuff now in the media where people are talking about this topic, and it's getting a lot more um, scrutiny. People are having honest conversations about it. There are definitely some problems. Nothing's perfect. I watched a news article the other day where someone was talking about how maybe it was 5 or 6 years ago, Canada got rid of a police agency they had called the Ports Police, which was entirely focused on basically it's like smuggling and organized crime using ports, and they got rid of them and replaced them with the RCMP. And the problem with that, of course, is that the RCMP is this big agency with a lot of different mandates being pulled in a lot of different directions, whereas the port police was like, one agency, this was your job kind of thing.
Sure.
And so, I saw in that news article, a guy was talking about how few containers come into the country are actually investigated or searched, for contraband, that kind of thing. And then issues around how we patrol the border and how it compares with how the U.S. government patrols the border, and the sort of the ways that things happen. And there's already been announcements of changes, and I think that any of these changes that they're talking about are positive. And the fact that it took a foreign leader to threaten tariffs in order to get some things to move along, I think is kind of sad, right? Like uh, we should always be trying to make things better. Uh, Oftentimes, I think that you need some kind of crisis to stimulate action.
Do
Um,
you find the tariff question is on the radar screen of small business owners? Is it something that they're actively thinking about?
I don't know if small business owners are thinking about it so much up here. I know that amongst Americans I've talked to, they're thinking about it.
Mhm.
It's a huge concern to big business up here, and that's if Canada and the U.S. have a difference in the balance of trade. Okay, so we do have a relatively small trade surplus with the United States, but if you look at what we export versus what we import, I mean, we export aluminum, lumber, oil. Like it's these giant category commodity things, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, we about an hour and a half from where I live is Canada's largest oil refinery. Like half their production goes to New England.
Hmm.
So, slap a 25% tariff on it. What's gonna happen to the price of gas in New England, right? And then out in Western Canada, so much of Alberta's oil goes into the US as well. I was watching another news article where a guy from Quebec was talking about aluminum exports. Quebec is a big exporter of aluminum. Apparently, 80% of its aluminum goes to the US, and half of it ends up in military applications.
Sure.
So, like aircraft, weaponry, all that kind of stuff. So this tariff could, cause the American military budget to have a huge problem. Like, it's just so easy to see that there's going to be these knock-on problems and effects throughout the economy. I think a lot of people here, well, the government's certainly taking it seriously, but I think a lot of your average Joe business owners here think that it was a statement made to get some action on some of these files that were important, and that it's a negotiating tactic.
Interesting.
Because if it really did happen, two things, Mike, and this is just my opinion, um, it would cause huge dislocations in the economy. Like people that thought they knew how to quote a client, would have to all of a sudden learn they need to go back and check their pricing all the time as these tariff effects ripple through the economy. There's going to be sticker shock from a lot of different people. People who, have a choice, like discretionary goods that go up in price could suddenly lose their demand.
Right.
It'd be devastating in a lot of different parts of the economy. But here's the biggest thing I think, and here's why I think it could be so harmful to capitalism, period. is that suddenly people will realize that you can make one election, have someone come in who can just make a statement and without going through some kind of due process, completely change the cost structure in the economy. Who's going to invest in a multi-billion dollar factory? Like, if you want to build a big plant and you know that you need a 15 to 20-year payback period to make that decision economical,
Sure.
and every 4 years you could face whimsical decisions that radically change the cost structure and the whole economy.
Fair.
I mean, how would you be able to plan on a 10 or 15-year horizon,
Right.
right?
Right. If the lights can be shut off or on at any time, uh, it, what am I willing to do? And the other side of it, I'm working with a client who is a US based manufacturer who directly competes with cheap goods that come in from China. And I'm
Yeah.
working with a small business that's the US rep for a European country, or a European company based overseas. So it's like, what policy is going to help both of them? Right? It's almost certain that the policy that's good for one is potentially going to have negative impacts on the other, and that's a tricky thing to balance. So, but it's an interesting observation that you make, because I know it's an active item on the radar screen of many small business owners that I talk with in the States, and was curious what you saw north of the border. So
Well, we've got a comment here from Neal, who says, if people really believe the tariffs were coming, I think they would have started buying products after the election and before Trump takes place in anticipation of prices going up. And if you're watching this and you really think that this is going to have an impact, well, get out there and buy toilet paper, because you'd be surprised how much of it comes from Canada,
David, I
right?
know people buying for that reason.
Do you?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Not toilet paper, but yeah. I think I think there's some of that going on. How much, I don't know, but again, it's a personal story I can share. I can't extrapolate it out to the marketplace. So
Well, but here's the other very concerning thing about tariffs, is that the way tariffs are sold to the public is it's sold as a punishment on foreigners.
right,
But that's not really what happens. What happens is you create this added cost, and it makes the product coming from a foreign country to be less competitive in the marketplace. That allows domestic producers to raise their prices. And so what the tariff does, whether people are willing to pay the higher price for the foreign good or they switch to the domestically produced good, the consumer, regardless, is going to pay more.
right, right,
So consumers lose, domestic producers benefit. And one of the things I don't think has really been talked about is what then is the reaction from the foreign country. Because if people think that these tariffs are going to be applied and then the foreign countries aren't going to do anything in retaliation,
right.
well, of course they will, right? And then this, just sort of questions the whole, integration of economies, right? Like, I mean, in the auto manufacturing sector, it's an often quoted statistic that there are some auto parts that go back and forth between Michigan and Ontario several times, like 7 times, before they
Interesting.
actually end up being put in a car, right? I mean, how is that going to be calculated?
Right.
The it So we'll have to wait and see what happens. And you know, I would like to, if Trump's intent was to create some fear and anxiety to get action on files that he thinks is important for him, then I hope he's successful in getting the action on the files that are important and making some changes with respect to border security and immigration and stuff, maybe that Canada should be doing. Because to me, if those things are improved, then I'm a net beneficiary of that stratagem,
Sure.
right? If the tariffs really do get applied, it's just going to be chaos.
Uh, um, it's going to be fascinating to watch if you're not directly impacted by it. If you are directly impacted, man, hold on for the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So, obviously, it was an exciting year with respect to the election and everything.
Yep.
We've got one coming up next year. Although I think they already announced the winner, if that's possible, because I think that the Liberals and Trudeau are so low in the polls now. They've actually said that Trudeau is trailing in his own riding now. So it very well could be that they might lose their official party status if they don't elect enough people. So
Wow.
it's going to be a big change, I think, north of the border here too.
Amazing. Yeah, it's an interesting time. What other highlights for 24, David? I mean, for me, I'm ready to make a bold call that in 2024 we saw peak buy a business guru activity. That's
Wow.
my prediction. I don't think it's going away. We haven't seen our last buy a business for no money down advertisement. But my gut tells me that we've gotten to the point where the volume and the stupidity of some of the stuff that's out there has gotten so ridiculous that I think even the most naive of us who want to buy a business are gonna start going, what? What? How can that be? I read it. I saw an ad not that long ago at peak 2024 buy a business moment that there are 75 million small businesses for sale in the US. 75 million. Now
So that would make
that's
that would make
complicated
what,
by
one in five people a business owner?
that's complicated by the fact that there's less than 33 million businesses in the entirety of the United States. But the ad, big and bold, 75 million small businesses for sale. And I thought, this might be as dumb as it can get. Now, those are words I'll probably be able to choke on next year. But yeah, you tell me, what do you see? Do you think the chaos can get louder than it's been?
Well, I think that I think it was 2019. I was working on a book that I put out that year called Smarter Than a Startup, and I drew the parallel between the whole startup craze, which was kind of like 10, 15 years before that. And the startup bandwagon got pretty exciting. There were, even at one point, around here anyway, like government agencies were set up to create incubators for these startups that were all going to create a new app that was going to disrupt the world, and every small town was going to be the home base of its own next Uber or whatever, right?
Yep.
And everyone thought that they had to get on this bandwagon, and et cetera. And I think when I first really saw how ridiculous that was when I realized that I started to hear about these pitch competitions, and people would share the stories of some of the startups being pitched, and it would be like these more and more outlandish ideas until you started to hear these stories where it was like there's no possible way that could ever be commercially viable. They're just trying to create some kind of story that they think is investable, because they're not trying to actually ever get customers. They're just trying to get investment.
Right. Right.
And you reach that tipping point, right? And then the whole thing just started to slide and fall apart.
Right.
And so I know there's definitely a life cycle to these mania. It's a mania,
It is.
right?
Yep.
And we've got to be coming to it soon. I keep thinking of that market adoption curve that I remember from my marketing 101 class back in university, where you've got the early adopters, and then you have, the next tranche of people, and then you have like the third group, and then the laggards, right? And it kind of shows how people adopt a product or whatever. And I think we're moving through some kind of similar structure. Um, I think that what ultimately is going to cause the turning point is more and more stories of people trying to do these super high leveraged acquisition deals from an undercapitalized point of standing to start with, and they're going to be willing to share the story of what really happened.
Right.
And I'm starting to see this more on places like Twitter, where people are talking about their business failures. I'm starting to hear more stories about it. There was an episode of Acquiring Minds this past year where a young lady who, together with her husband, bought a garage door opener business, and she really gave an honest story of what happened, what their situation was, and how things did not work out the way that they were promised. And of course, she was an experienced business person too. She'd been in
Sure.
a business that she started with her husband for over 10 years. But she got on the bandwagon because she heard one of these common household guru names on a podcast, and she got all excited about the idea and went out and ended up buying a business. I made a video about it that came out earlier in the fall. 90-day express business acquisition, I think, is what I called it. And which I covered her story and talked about 6 big problems with the deal that they did. But I think, more of those stories are going to come out. And I think that the power that the internet gives, the reason why these gurus are on the internet, this is just, in my mind, a branch of the age old get rich quick kind of thing. They've just got a different story that they're telling. Like, instead of here's a business you can start to get rich quick, it's here's how you can buy a business and get rich quick kind of thing. Um, they're on the internet because of the leverage it provides. It lets them reach more people who are susceptible to the message very quickly.
Right.
It's that same power of the internet that I think is going to be what pushes back, because as people fall into this interest, and they start watching the gurus videos on YouTube or whatever, for example, the algorithm is going to start to show them other people. And I know this works because I meet people all the time in my own videos who will leave a comment saying, I found you because I was watching this other person.
Interesting.
And so, like, the YouTube algorithm is feeding them this content with the idea that this is what they're interested in, but then they end up on my channel, or they end up on other people's channels where they're hearing these, like, honest stories and feedback about what can happen.
So
I
chaos
mean,
is driving them to common sense.
maybe, yeah, or just they eventually will run into someone who is touting the message that, of all the assets you could possibly put your money into, a small business is probably the riskiest one.
Right.
And if all you're hearing is people's success stories, it's easy to lose track of that.
I
Like the echo chamber you can get in online. If you're always hearing success stories of people doing deals, and you're always hearing these guru messages, it can become easy to kind of believe, oh, this is a sure thing.
right.
But in reality, this is the riskiest kind of thing you can get into.
Well, and you captured it so well there. The commentary, the storytelling is about doing deals. It's not about the 3 years of 12-hour days that comes after you've done the deal that was supposed to represent passive income for you, right? It's that learning curve that anyone who's ever been an active small business owner has learned, either the easy way or the hard way. But the messaging, I want to have faith that the messaging has gotten so goofy, has gotten so out there, that people are able to just look and see this can't possibly be the case. I
Well,
mean, the promises that are made in some of these ads, and maybe it's my own fault. My search history is such that I'm not on social media anymore without getting a half dozen ads shoved at me for this stuff.
well, it's the echo chamber nature of the internet. Later this afternoon, my buddy Mark Mawhinney is going to be on, and he's the host of the Natural Born Coaches podcast. And so, the coaching industry went through this same little thing uh, a few years ago. I think the bubbles kind of popped over there. But he used to share with me some of the crazy things he would see, and there'd be, again, this series of gurus telling people that they could start a coaching business in their spare time. If you know anything about anything, you can coach other people or whatever. And then the promises that were coming out, like, you can start a six-figure coaching business in under 6 months, and then all of a sudden it's a
Right.
seven-figure coaching business in 90 days, and then it's an eight-figure coaching business in 30 days, right?
David, all you
To
need
your
is
point, there's
ten
like more and more
$10,000 a
extravagant.
month clients to achieve that goal. Just $10,000 a month clients, and you'll get
That's
there.
right.
Crazy,
Yeah. Right.
crazy.
And so, but eventually someone realizes, wait a minute, I'm a guy from a small Midwestern town. Who's going to pay me $10 million to be their coach? Right. Like it just, you're right. It just gets so crazy that it starts to shake people off, I guess. We've got someone over on Instagram says 109% of everybody goes on the train, to the point of exaggeration. We got Victor over in Nottingham says he gave the show a like. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Victor.
Victor.
And he goes on to say, when will people stop thinking that they can buy a way to get rich quick? I believe Warren Buffett said that no one wants to get rich slow. And it's true. Rocky Lalvani is coming on the show later today, too. And he once told me that he had a program he put together that would, with 100% certainty, make anyone a millionaire. The problem was nobody would buy it after they found out it was a decade program.
Or it costs $2 million.
Well, no, I don't think it did, but it required time, right?
Time,
And
indeed.
but people didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's and here's the saddest part about the whole thing from my perspective is that we need more small business owners, and that spark that lives inside the person who reads that ad or sees that program who thinks, I'd like to do this, that little flame gets just smothered and crushed when they try to do it that way. And from my perspective, that's probably the worst outcome of all of this, is that it ends up discouraging people that maybe could find success and satisfaction through that ownership path, but because they try a shortcut, that opportunity gets eliminated.
Do you think so? Like I wonder, and this is why I'm raising a point of doubt here, because but I get a lot of interaction from people in the comments of my videos and on Twitter and all this kind of stuff, of people who get drawn into this. And what I find is that before this bubble started to grow, let's go back to 2017, for
Yep.
example. Almost everyone I spoke to in 2017 was a person who had some kind of business experience, either in management, maybe in a big company or what have you. Like they kind of knew something about business. They had some degree of capital. So they had some savings or home equity or something that they could draw upon.
Yep.
They had made the decision that they wanted to be in business. And before they met me, usually they would already decided that they wanted to buy. And so they were typing questions into the internet about the how. And then they would end up finding my videos. That's how they would end up in my audience. And what I'm finding now with a lot of these gurus out there is that people who really have never expressed any interest at all in business are being sucked into it because they're being told these messages about how there's such a fantastic opportunity. There's all these businesses with no buyers, et cetera, et cetera. And then maybe they'll buy some info products, they'll buy some books, they'll spend some time learning. When they eventually realize just how difficult it is, they end up just leaving the space. Like, I don't really think they were business owners or entrepreneurs anyway.
David, that's certainly the case for some of them, maybe many of them. I would also suggest that there's folks out there that are interested in ownership that prior to this, this madness would have pursued that ownership interest by reaching out to their current boss or the owner of the company that they're at, or looking at some more traditional route to simple business ownership, who now instead have been told that they don't have to work that 5 years or do that. We go back to 2017, and you and I know that classic stat that said 9 out of 10 searchers won't find a business. I don't believe the guru madness has improved that statistic. it could only have made it worse. And so from my perspective, it's just another sacrificial lamb at the altar of these folks trying to make quick money.
Yeah. The other thing too, unfortunately, is that some people are, setting themselves up to really be taken advantage of. In the past year, I've probably had 3 or 4 conversations now with people who want advice on making offers on businesses, in particular, these sort of home service, mechanical, HVAC, plumbing, electrical kinds of businesses. But
Sure.
here's the thing, is in these 4 conversations that I thought about recently, they were talking about businesses with as few as 2 technicians, right? And they want to pay these really what I consider to be high prices. And it's because there's so much hot activity in that space. People have this idea that somehow an HVAC business is recession proof and the margins are rock solid and you just can't do anything wrong. And in all 4 of these cases, I had to say to people, like, you realize one recruiter could come along and take your entire workforce. Like, you're going to pay money for this. And just the other day, I saw 2 plumbing accounts on Twitter having some messages back and forth, where one of them was saying, "Hey, did you hear about this guy who wants to buy this business for $1 million?" And I told him that he could start that business for 50 grand in a pickup truck.
Right. I was going to ask, of those potential buyers, how many of them ever switched out a compressor before?
Well, and this is the point, is that they just don't have any experience whatsoever in these things. They're just excited about the idea that somehow they're buying a business that can't be replaced by Amazon. And now, oh, Rocky's popped in. Hey, Rocky. The thing though that I want to highlight about these HVAC, plumbing, electrical businesses, etc., is that this idea or this notion that it's recession proof. And if, believe me, if there's any plumbers, electricians in the audience right now, put your comments in. I'd love to hear them. Right now, there's a huge number of large scale construction projects underway. But because of the sudden increase in interest rates, new starts are slowing down. In fact, it's a big hot topic in Toronto right now because it's a big condo market, but there's no new buildings being started. As those buildings are finished and all the new construction plumbers and electricians finish their work, what do you think those people are going to do? They're going to go looking for work in the service side of the business, right? And if they can't find a job, they're just going to put up an ad on the internet somewhere. And they're going to go and be the neighborhood plumber until the next big high rise goes up. And so what impact is that going to have on these established mechanical businesses? It's going to create huge pricing shocks throughout the industry. And then which business do you want to be? Do you want to be the plumbing business that started from scratch, that, has grown organically and doesn't have any debt? Or do you want to be the plumbing business that was acquired 18 months ago with a 90% loan?
Right. Yeah, that added burden.
Because that business is going to have this huge debt service. They're not going to be in a position to be able to fight any kind of price war. And I struggle with why people can't see that simple relationship between the new build versus service. I don't know.
Especially,
Rocky,
David, if you bought
you're
that
here to
business.
explain it to us.
David, especially if you bought that business with the intention of not getting your hands dirty, right? Now you got that service call to fill. You don't know how to do it because you were just going to be a business owner. So, Rocky, great to see you.
Great to be here. I always love Mike's LinkedIn posts. He always tells the truth, that everyone else is telling all the fluff, trying to sell all that great stuff. Mike's like, no, this is the reality of what it is. And I appreciate that honesty.
That's very kind of you, Rocky. I appreciate it. Same in reverse. I enjoy your content. How was 2024 for you?
2024 was a wonderful year. We're locked and loaded for 2025 and looking forward to great things. I was listening to your conversation, and it's funny because in the world of real estate, it's the exact same scenario going back 10 or 20 years. Like if you think back to, buy property, no money down, get money at closing. All these people would spend all this money to learn how to buy real estate, and none of them would actually buy a house.
Great
I
example.
witnessed that personally, Rocky. I got invited over along with 7 other guys I know to help a friend of ours move a pool table, right? So he basically said, "Hey, can you guys all come over? We want to move the pool table from one room to another." And so I go over there, and he's got a bookshelf in his family room, and there's this whole row of basically kind of like these Carlton Sheets programs, come
Mhm.
down to the airport Hilton and learn how to buy real estate. This was back in the 1990s. And I looked at it and I was fascinated by the idea of that stuff at the time. And I said to him, "Oh my God, I didn't know you were into this. How many properties do you own?" And he was like, "Oh, I haven't bought any." But he'd been to like 4 of these programs
Hmm.
and spent all the money and got all the books and binders and everything. And the only property he owned was his personal home.
Human nature, huh? Funny how that is.
Is that just aspiration versus execution? Is that what that is? It is. I mean, we know the gurus sell a little bit of truth along with the goop. Is it just a failure to execute, or is there something fundamentally flawed about the information?
So I was to one of these conferences a couple of years ago because I always like to learn how they sell and how they get
And
people.
sorry,
back
Rocky,
through.
how many properties do you own? Because you own a bunch.
Well, we're actually selling them all off because I got tired of being a landlord.
At your peak, how many did you have?
At our peak, I had 5 rentals, I think, but we were also flipping houses a couple every year. So we were buying, selling, and then we kept a few of them as rentals, and then
Okay.
now we're gone.
So this, okay, I just wanted to lay the foundation here that you've been through this, you know of what you speak. So sorry for the interruption. Carry on. You wanted to learn how they were selling this stuff.
I wanted to learn how they were selling the programs, right? So the sales process. They they tell what is technically the truth, but in reality doesn't work. So, going back to like Mike's posts, I want to sell my business for $1 million. It's worth $1 million. Okay. Not really. And it's the same thing with the house. They're like, go buy this house for $100,000 and you don't have to do anything and sell it for 150 and you'll make 50 grand. Well, yeah, that technically you're right. You will. But A, you can't get that house for 100, and B, no one's going to pay you 150. So it's kind of a game there. And you
Known
need
some house
cash.
flippers. I've known some house flippers, and it seemed like the only time they really had any degree of success was when they were able to locate the seller, usually through some kind of social network connection, so that there'd be trust established early. And the seller had to have some extreme motivation reason to want to do a deal very, very quickly. It just seemed like if those 2 things weren't there, the sellers quickly realized that they could do much better just by having the property sold in a more public, open fashion, you know, with a real estate agent or something like that.
Well, and so the properties we were buying, like, this was back when they were stealing all the copper. We're like, oh, the copper's gone. Great. We'll get a discount. And no one else can buy it because no one can get a loan. But we were coming in with cash. And so we're like, yeah, we'll buy it. We'll fix the copper. We know how to do that. It's not a big deal. And then we can make it. And even some of these other properties, if they don't meet like FHA requirements, then they're not getting, if it's not bank lendable, you can't get a retail buyer. The other thing which really shocked me, and this was even true at the higher price points, everyone wanted the perfect house and they were willing to overpay for the perfect house. I'm like, I don't understand why. And it came down to a simple thing. They didn't have the money to fix the house, but they could afford the extra $200 a month in the payment.
Right.
And if you think about it, like people are like, I'm going to buy this business and I'm going to take it over and run it. And my first thought is there working capital? Like if you don't have enough to barely buy the business and you need to get paid and there's no working capital, how do you plan on making payroll and all of the other things that need to go on, or purchasing inventory, or there's so many things involved. And how do you do all of that? And I don't think that really sinks into people, especially if you've never owned a business and had to deal with all of the numbers and everything else.
What's worse is that a lot of business brokers out there don't quite get that. And so they'll think that a business that doesn't require much in the way of operating capital might be worth, 3 times cash flow, and they'll apply that same reasoning to another business, but the second business maybe sells to other businesses and has 45-day receivables and stuff like that. And they'll just kind of ignore all that. And it has an impact on the investment the buyer needs to make. I run into that all the time when buyers come to us with deals that they found, and when we start to, you know, ask questions like, "Hey, why are there no balance sheets in this sim?" And then the broker says, "Well, that's private." I'm like, "We need to assess the operating capital required. How can it be private?" Like, and you realize that the broker you're dealing with isn't much help because they don't even understand what it is that you're trying to understand.
It's funny. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, David, Rocky, I'm going to leave the two of you to it. But before I do that, David, I've got to plug something that's coming in 2025. On January 9th, I'm going to appear with David C. Barnett, and we are going to talk about online business valuation calculators. I'm pretty excited about that show. So before I left it to the two of you, I wanted to throw in a quick plug for that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun because I know you've been doing some research and playing with them. And I supplied some sample data for you to use for a company that, boy, was having a hard time. And I want to see what those online value calculators say that the company is worth, because I'm going to be really
it's going
curious.
to be entertaining and informational. So, gentlemen,
Good.
thank you for the conversation. Happy holidays to the both of you. And David, again, thank you for the invite.
Awesome. Great to see you, Mike.
All
Have
right.
a happy holiday season yourself.
Take care.
Kind of getting back to your comment, we just did an episode, and I had a gentleman on who owned 2 franchises. Both were in the home service space. So one was insulation. They were insulating homes, and the other was doing, I'll call them high end, but nice closet, not really remodels, but where they come in and they put all that fancy racking and all that stuff in. He said both businesses had about the same amount of revenue. All right. So on paper, when you looked at the P&Ls, 2 businesses were equal, essentially. And yet the closet business threw off tons of free cash flow, and they were always able to take profits. The insulation business did not throw off tons of free cash flow, and they were always struggling to take profit. And the differential was actually on what you talk about, the balance sheet.
Yeah.
And it was on the balance sheet in 2 ways. The insulation company, you got paid hopefully 30 days post, or maybe 60 if the builder took forever. The custom closets, they got paid up front before they even ordered. They got upfront pricing. And so that was a big thing. And the second thing with the custom closets, there was 0 inventory, essentially. I mean, they had some parts. With insulation, in order to get the volume discounts, they had to buy a ton of insulation and hope they picked right. And they had a warehouse full of insulation that they also had to pay for the warehouse now because they had all the insulation in it.
Well, and the thing that people also, so if you look at a company like that, the insulation company, and you look at it at a snapshot in time, you can figure out, well, here's the operating capital that they required at that moment. But what people often then fail to also realize moving forward is if the company is growing, if you're selling more every year, then all of those things, the receivables, the inventory, all of this stuff has to grow. And the investment in the capital for those extra things is always after tax money. So it's like the money that would normally be flowing out to your free cash flow and profit, that's specifically the cash that's got to go back in to keep this balloon inflated, as it were, right? To keep it operational.
And that's exactly what was going on. And people don't realize that. And on top of that, going back to what you gentlemen were talking about earlier, If you now add debt service because you bought the business, that's your debt service is not the same as the previous person's debt service.
Right.
And so you've got to calculate in that new payment. And then, like you said, if your cash flow is behind, growth actually can take you to bankruptcy because you get so far behind on cash flow. But the P&L says you're profitable, so maybe we can sell it for $1 million, right?
Hey, well, we got a comment here from RG. He says, how about a $12 million, 20% profit, 15% growth year over year biz? Yeah, I would say that this business is exactly the kind that we're talking about because it's growing so quickly. It would have to keep feeding that profit back into it to fill operating capital. RG, I have no idea what the multiples would be. It's more dependent upon the industry rather than the size. So that's the biggest factor because every industry's got its own risk characteristics. So and anyway, but sorry, Rocky.
No, and I think this is the issue. There are a lot of different factors that drive multiple, and to be able to understand them, and then also to understand where that business is in the cycle. And what I mean by that is, I'm sure you've seen this too. I think the last couple of years, the car wash business has taken off, right? Everyone, at least in the United States, around where we are, they keep opening up all these new car washes. PE seems to be all over them. They're talking about ridiculous multiples. But here's the thing. If you have an old car wash, if you haven't been making capital improvements and you're not ready to rebuild it, your old car wash is quickly declining in value. And if two people decide to build a car wash, which happened by us, then the question is who wins the race? Like whose car wash is open first? Because number two, the chances of them, and then if they didn't calculate in, like when they did the survey, oh, we're the only car wash in a 7-mile radius, and 3 people do that. Now you got 3 car washes.
Rocky, I've seen this so many times. I've written about the time when the frozen yogurt business boomed around here. We got like 7 of them in a year, and 5 years later, 6 of them closed. Like as soon as the leases came and like ended, like people packed it up, right? And I'm sure that the first couple probably were doing very well. Same thing happened with trampoline parks here. We didn't have one for the longest time, and it's a city with a metro area of about 150,000. And so all of a sudden, to your point, 2 opened at once. And I think probably they didn't know about each other, and they both opened, and one of them had a better location. That's the one that survived. And the same thing happened not with full car washes, but we had a mini boom of coin op car washes probably in the early 2000s. It just seemed like every major road in the city suddenly got one. And today you can drive around, you can find buildings like used car dealerships, for example, and you can tell by looking at the building it used to be a coin op car wash. Like it didn't survive, and someone had to sell the property, and some other guy repurposed it.
It's funny. And I think what happens is something becomes a little hot. All the
Yep.
gurus start pumping and humping on it. Everyone starts running into it, and they don't think through all of this. The question is, what is the longevity of the product? Is it a fad? Is it a long-term type of an event? And then how does that in a lot of these, they might have been franchises, or maybe they're not a franchise. How are you going to compete? And are you reinvesting in ensuring that you have capital? Because if somebody comes in across the street, it's a game changer. By us, we have 2 big gas stations, Sheetz and Wawa.
Okay.
If a Sheetz opens up around, every other gas station around it is pretty much going out of business. Like, because they just dominate that particular market.
And what is it? Is it cheaper price fuel, or is it the whole retail experience is better?
It is they charge a reasonable price for fuel towards the lower end, but they have a large convenience store, number one thing for a lot of these places, we have clean bathrooms,
Yep.
nice, clean, big bathrooms, a million different drink options, and then they make some basic food items and the milkshakes and snacks. And actually ours now sell beer and wine, which for PA is kind of different. So it's the whole, I can get gas, grab my decent coffee, grab a snack for the kid, go to the bathroom. It just makes it, and you know what you're getting when you go there. And because the one thing is they're all pretty similar.
We've got a whole bunch of comments that I want to catch up on here.
Yeah,
So Carlos had made a comment about what we were saying there about HVAC or laundry businesses. He says, so true. I follow a lot of these business buyer gurus and most push HVAC or laundry businesses. Victor said, if the programs worked, they would equip people with the ability to motivate themselves to implement. I would actually make this comment about the gurus and their programs. If you look at professional business buyers, the people who spend all day, every day looking at businesses to buy them, these are like your private equity groups, right? They're not trying to increase the field of buyers. They, they don't want to compete with people, right? Like, and so, you know, understand what the motivation is of the, I get people every once in a while who will leave comments on my videos and they'll say, how many businesses have you bought recently? And I'm like, I'm not in the business of buying businesses. I'm in the business of doing consulting services and helping people buy businesses. That's why I have this channel. Someone who wants to buy businesses should be trying to keep all the good deals to themselves, right?
they should. And that's true of a lot of different things that are out there, right? And it's the same thing, even in the real estate world. You don't want all that competition. I think what it is you have to realize a lot of these things, the business model is education. It's
Right.
not the actual product that they're selling. And they're very good at doing what they do. They've got it, they've got the sales of educational type products down cold, and they know how to build their value ladders and their funnels and their excitement. But when you look at all of them, the people don't take action because they got excited about something. And when they actually start to do the work, they realize how hard it is and how much work it actually takes. And that's why, like, we're selling our rentals because the markets keep changing. And so what was good is currently in our particular area not where I want to spend my time. Now, somebody else might, and that's perfectly wonderful for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing when you're picking a business. You've got to pick one that suits your personality and your behaviors. And I think being able to match that up well is extremely important. Giuseppe's not coming on today, is he? No.
No, not this
No.
year.
Okay.
I changed it up a little bit. I got a different guest lineup here today.
No, that's fine. I mean, and it's really making sure that you match your business to you so that you're in alignment. Otherwise, it becomes a real struggle because you're going to hit tough times. And the question is, are you going to survive?
Yes, and with small businesses, because I've got a client, a member of my group coaching program, who talks a lot about bench strength. And one of the things that I think a lot of people lose sight of is that in these small businesses, we're typically talking about a small head count. You are reliant upon people that work for you in these businesses that know what they're doing. And oftentimes there's not 100% overlap in cross training or skills between your employees. You can have a group of rather specialized people in a lot of these small businesses. And so what that means is if someone has to depart, the backfill is you a lot of the times. And so this is why I stress so much that you need to have some kind of working knowledge or or a plan to develop some skill at least to be able to really understand what's going on in the business.
Or deep pockets?
Oh yeah, or you just solve the problem with money, right? We we have speaking of money, here's part-time money. Phil Taylor says, Merry Christmas, gents. Appreciate all the wise advice you provide throughout the year. Hope you have a blessed 2025. Thank you very much, Phil. And he follows up with a question, Rocky. He says, since Rocky's on, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on the long-term outlook for CPA firms. Oh, great question. What do you think, Rocky? What's your long-term outlook on CPA firms? Or is everyone just going to subscribe to Chat CPA?
Good luck with that. So first, let's talk about the reality of what's going on. Just like in the HVAC industry, finding younger people who want to do skilled labor is very difficult. The CPA profession is experiencing the same thing. They are having a difficult time filling the CPA pipeline. And a couple things happen. One, they changed the requirements and upped them. But more importantly, what kids are starting to do today is go, hey, where do I have the opportunity to get a return on my time and my money? And entry-level CPAs and even the lower-level CPA ranks, they're still following the old model of partners. And so the pay did not keep up with other industries. So I think you've got a labor issue, and being able to do the work is important. Now, technology has dramatically increased. So maybe not chat yet particularly, and maybe you can build certain parts of chat to do inputs and do a lot of that. So technology has also made it better. However, there's a lot of discernment that takes place on a tax return. You can put something on this line or that line, and each of them have different outcomes and different reasons. That still takes a little bit of thinking and understanding. The other thing that has happened in the world of the CPA firms is I think about a third of them have sold out to PE. Now, I don't know what you think about PE. When I look at PE, most of them seem to be, hey, we borrowed a lot of money and we paid a lot for this. You need to give us big returns or we're going to whip you a little harder. and they jack up prices and they do that. So that's going to create some sort of ripple in the industry. PT owns a small firm, and because of that, because he is a likable person who has trust and reputation, literally he can just catch all the people who are tired of everything else and grow his firm, I think, and operationalize it. But you had something. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I've had conversations with people that work in firms, in companies of various kinds that have been acquired by PE. And I would have to say that PE acquisitions create market opportunities for new entrepreneurs because of the way they typically try to squeeze that last drop of money out of every business. To your point, yes, that, private equity is private. We don't know what is behind them, but I think a lot of them operate the way you say. They have a lot of leverage, a lot of borrowed money. There could be some out there that are just, family office based, that are spending family money and do whatever they want. But I think that the other big trend with CPA firms, and I speak to CPAs quite often in the normal course of my business, what I'm noticing is that the old school geographically based CPA firm is probably disappearing. As their clientele ages out and sells out, those firms are in trouble because people do not go to their accountant anymore with a box full of receipts. People are using these online bookkeeping systems, and with technology, to your point, it used to be that a CPA in one particular state was an expert on all the rules there, and a lot of people probably stayed in the bounds of the territories they were familiar with. Today, with technology, it's very easy for a CPA anywhere to file tax returns for any state, etc. So what I see happening is that the firms that are ahead of the curve are becoming sort of market silo driven. So they're saying, we are the CPAs of this kind of business or that kind of business, and they're going after those clients nationally, and they're becoming category killers, right? They're like, we are the people that work with businesses like yours. And as soon as you do that as a CPA firm, you can offer all kinds of added benefit. Like you can do internal benchmarking amongst your clients. You can say, look, if you sign up with us, we're going to give you the annual report that shows you where you rank among other companies like yours that we serve. Like the value of that kind of information to someone is incredible. Like that in itself is a reason to go to one firm over another. And I see that increasingly as the way that industry has to go. Is the CPAs will become industry specific specialists. There's plenty of room for lots of them. Like, I mean, there's room for 1,000 CPA firms that specialize in restaurants and catering, just because there's so many restaurants, right?
There is, and I agree with you. I think there's specialization. If you're a smaller firm, I think you can be nimble. You can offer a different level of service. What we're noticing is a lot of them are starting to change the way they treat each other, in the sense that, hey, we're not going to kill ourselves for tax season. We're going to take an appropriate load factor. We're not going to deal with emergencies. A lot of the CPAs are like, if you're a red flag client, you're out. They're hiking prices, and they can, because PE is hiking prices. So it creates the ability to do that. And some people are willing to pay for services, especially if they're smart enough to do tax planning, because then you can show how all the deductions come in and so forth. The other thing is we're starting to see a lot of firms go more to advisory. So not just here is your tax return, but hey, let's talk about how to improve your business, because that's what CPAs used to do 20, 30, 40 years ago. And for whatever reason, they got away from having those conversations with business owners.
I've got one comment here we're going to look at before we open the door and invite our next guest in. It says, Rocky, you talked about petrol stations. Branding as a guarantee of quality and good customer service is something that small businesses often struggle to keep up with. You know what? I was a guest on a podcast a couple of months ago with a bunch of other people, and the topic was, it was a business. Yeah, we got Neal Isaacs in the room. I'm going to invite Neal to come in and join us. Hey, Neal.
Hey, everybody.
The topic of the show was a manufacturing company that had been around for 30 years, had never built out a marketing or sales function at all. And they had always just coasted on the relationships that they had. And then all of a sudden, now they're in a position where they need sales. They don't have the ability to go get sales because they never built out that function. And one of the other guests described it as a deferred investment in marketing and sales. And I thought it was a great way to describe it, just the way you would describe a deferred maintenance in equipment. Like, you keep putting something off, eventually you got a really big bill to pay, right? And I think that gets to the heart of Victor's comment, because I think in small business, it's very easy to say, I don't want to pay that. I'd rather have that money come out into my pocket. And then eventually these things accumulate until you end up with these deficits, these deferred investments, and then you end up being one of the gas stations that Sheetz puts out of business.
And the same thing happens in the car wash industry. And we talked about that earlier. And I'm sure the same thing happens in many, many industries. Is people want the newer, fancier, latest, greatest. And, it's just the reality of it. So if you're not raising prices and putting money aside and putting money back into it, then there's a good chance, if your industry gets disrupted, that you get
branding is the CapEx of sales and marketing.
Neal Isaacs, host of the Raleigh Business Broker YouTube channel and a business broker in Raleigh, South Carolina?
North Carolina. Yeah.
North Carolina. Sorry.
I forget you being up in Canada, but we got two Carolinas. I'm in the North one.
All these extra Carolinas kicking around. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Welcome to the show, Neal. Neal, you and I met this past year. We appeared on each other's show, and I thought it'd be great to invite you over. Do you have something to add to this? Like, have you had any clients that would fit into that kind of bucket that you've had, or maybe people you've turned away? I don't know.
Of course. Business brokers love the retiring business owner. There's a lot of different avatars that we help, but the retiring business owner, the boomer, they don't have websites. Oftentimes they never needed them. They just started with a truck and they built something big, and they're like, marketing, I don't need to market. customers are lining up because of me and because our brand. Well, you could reinforce that a little bit. It's not going to hurt.
And have you ever had anyone who comes to you because they're having a little bit of a struggle? Like, tell us about maybe some of the people that you don't want to work with. You talked about the boomer, but who are the other avatars?
Well, there are, as a business broker, you get a lot of calls and you feel like you're the last step before the trash can. I tell people, hey, I did my valuation, and unfortunately, you could liquidate, but they're not making money. And so I never say this business is worthless. I say, I'm not confident that I can find a business buyer to achieve your goals, because I'm being honest. And a lot of times they'll say,
That's very diplomatic, Neal. That's a very diplomatic way to put it.
well, I don't want to call someone's baby ugly, but oftentimes they'll say, I kind of knew that. I just wanted to hear it from a professional. So, I'm providing that service. There's more of those than the quality. They've invested in the business. They're making money and they're ready to transfer that wealth. There's more, reality.
I don't know if, we earlier when Mike Finger was on, we were talking about, people drawn into the online content about buying a business. And I don't know if people really appreciate that fact. I mean, I say the stat all the time that most, and maybe it's the problem is that there's no hard and true statistics we can point to, but I'll say that most small businesses aren't worth buying because they don't make enough money and they have all kinds of other problems. And you really see that all the time, don't you, when you're when you're answering these phone calls?
I mean, I used to say we turn down 1 out of 10. We're turning down 19 out of 20. We turn down more and more business opportunities just because we can't add value, or it wouldn't be a win-win. Like we could get somebody out of their lease if they're willing to pay a fee, but they're not walking away happy. There's more of those opportunities out there.
That's interesting to me. Okay, so what you're talking about is a business maybe that isn't worth a whole lot, but closing it is an even bigger hazard to the owner because of the liability on the lease. So they may even not want to sell the business just to get money. They just want to sell the business to get their name off the lease.
Absolutely. They're trying to put somebody else in first position, and they're not in a good situation, but they would pay to get out of the bad situation that they're in. A business isn't just an opportunity, it's also a liability, and they want to get out of those liabilities.
Rocky's thinking this is one of these businesses he can buy for no money down.
No. Here's my question, because how many of them are actually fixable? Meaning, if we looked at the business itself and took the time to understand everything, could we, over a period of 2 years, with some work, shift the business from where it is to a much more profitable business? Or do these people just have no hope?
Yes. Every business is fixable. When I think about, is this a transferable business or is it a marketable business? I think about that business buyer that's thinking, I could buy this and fix it, or I could just start from scratch. I think, David, you said, I'm one truck away from starting this business. So if the replacement cost is greater than the value of the going concern.
Yeah. I always called that redevelopment value. Like, so if you've got a failing Italian restaurant and some guy wants to open a Greek restaurant, it's always cheaper to buy the failing Italian restaurant and redecorate and get, print up new menus, right? Because all the stuff in the kitchen is largely going to be useful to you. And it's certainly going to be cheaper to do a deal with the failing restaurateur than to buy an empty, brand new, strip mall location and build it out, right? So
yeah.
But it's a tough story. I mean, I had a couple of those in my business broker days, and it's tough. But usually, by the time people got to the point where they were having those conversations with me, they were so beaten up by their own business, they were just looking for the door, right?
Absolutely.
So they were eventually willing to do one of those deals that made sense.
Yeah, small business is tough, and people attack a business for 5 years, a decade with this fervor and the build mentality. And then after they've climbed that mountain and they look up and see the next mountain, they're like, I want someone else to go on this journey.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity there for someone that's just got more energy to step in and take it to the next level.
What What have been your big takeaways so far for 2024 as far as the year gone by here, Neal, as far as what you've seen in the market or in deals that you've been working on?
Well, I've been listening to you guys talk, and I enjoyed Mike's comments, and Rocky, I've enjoyed your comments, and I'll disagree with Mike. I think there's plenty of stupid people out there. I want to go on record and say there's more opportunity for people to push the limit. But I like how he put a stake in the ground there. But so the business buyer thing, definitely it's strong. And I just did a video on the Raleigh Business Broker YouTube channel about a laundromat where we had 640 buyers. And
Holy cow.
yeah, I did a whole deal breakdown of the volume and how we managed that. We had a live buyer owner meeting with 50 buyers in it, but the seller got it was in a really good position because of that. Right. So
How many of those 600 buyers were local to the business and how many were away?
I didn't look at the numbers. Probably 80% of them were local.
Okay.
And I know at least 5 of them were other laundromat operators. You can tell by the emails and stuff like that.
To me, that's just fantastic, because to me, as someone who's already in the industry and knows the business, who wants to step up and look at buying it, that's a great indication that it's a really worthwhile asset, right?
Yeah.
And other local people, that's confidence in the market, it's confidence in the business, it's confidence in the industry, just shows that all those things are firing on all pistons. I thought you were going to tell me that, the majority of them were from away, and then I would draw a different conclusion from that.
Well, a lot of that's my buyer network. I'm a general business broker. I serve my target market. Yeah, people can discover it, but most of that, we have a pretty good way of banging the drum when we have a listing and going back to those people that had pinged on laundromats in the past. And I haven't sold a laundromat in 7 years. I sold a lot when I got started, and then I kind of got away from it. And this one came online, and it was clean. And by that, I mean, not only was the laundromat clean, but it had clean books. So it's a financeable laundromat, which is more rare than you think. Rocky, you'll appreciate that.
I would appreciate it. It's funny. And kind of going back, I think right now laundromats are on the high list of businesses you don't have to do much with, right? That self-manage themselves, supposedly. At least that's what all the gurus tell me.
I would, yeah.
I'm going to hop off, David. Thank you for having me. For any of you who have a business and want to fix the profit and cash flow, that's what we do. So great to meet you again. Great to meet you, Neal. Enjoy the rest.
Have a good one, Rocky. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
There's a great need for the Rockies out there that are fixing businesses. Because back to my point, I mean, the majority of businesses, there's a, I just became a CPA, Certified Exit Planning Advisor,
Yep.
and they talk about the wealth gap, the profit gap that people need. They have the number that they need. It's always an arbitrary number. I need 10 million or I need 5 million. It's always a round number somehow that they want to exit for. And that's kind of how they're judging their business. And then we do the valuation, and it's worth $1 million if they're on a good day. And it's like, how are we going to get from here to here? And so there's a lot of work to be done there. That's kind of the norm, I see.
You raise an interesting point about the laundromat having clean books. And what I've noticed, 15 years ago, if I talked to a restaurant owner, they were telling me that 60% of their receipts were in cash.
Yeah.
And so there was a huge opportunity there for someone who didn't want to declare all their revenue or whatever to be doing some hanky-panky with the money. But if you talk to a restaurateur today, most of them will tell you that 95% of their receipts are with card, right? I'm seeing the same kind of thing with laundromats as people change over from these coin-based systems to these like stored value card type of systems. And then all of a sudden, again, the transactions, the sales are all being paid for with other cards, credit cards, debit cards, that kind of thing. Is that the kind of system that this place had? And are you seeing that more commonly?
This one was just shifting over to that. I have sold laundromats that had card systems installed, and then the buyer went back to no card because the demo that particular laundromat preferred did not like, they preferred cash. So they ended up hiring an employee to take their cash, convert it into the system that their systems used and then to manually swipe it. So it doesn't always work, but that's the goal, right? To make it less dependent on cash and everything. But laundromats are a little bit finicky, but you're 100% right about restaurants. There's no second register, and like there used to be, where if you pay cash, they're like, come over here, we're going to ring you up on this register. That always meant that they're taking that, and it's not the right way to run a business. So, but we're seeing a lot less of that two book type situation now in the age of credit cards.
I met one restaurateur once, and what they were doing, they were open 7 days a week, like most restaurants are. And what they were doing is on one day of the week, only family members worked there. They actually picked up the cash register, the regular one, and put it under the counter and had a completely
Wow.
different cash register that sat on the counter on that day only.
Yeah.
So that even the cash register tape of transactions, ran smoothly through the whole thing.
Oh, I see. They were open 6 days a week, and then there was a different day of the week they were
on this other cash register, right? So because they were trying to fudge their audit trail,
right.
it never ceased to amaze me the stuff that people would dream up if they really set their focus on pulling off one of these things. And then the mental and verbal acrobatics that they go through to try to justify and reconcile it when they want to sell, and why they should still get paid the full regular price, even though they have all these sort of dubious books.
Yeah. As an intermediary, I get it all the time. Obviously we don't report all of our funds, but we want to get paid for that. And my answer is just like, you already got paid for that. Imagine how much you saved in taxes over the years. You didn't report $100,000 a year for the last 10 years. Imagine if there's 30% tax on that, you made $300,000 in tax savings. So instead of trying to get it now, just change the way that you do business. Well, let's just wait a few years, start reporting all your revenues. That's one way to do it. People don't like to hear that, but I'm not gonna be complicit in a crime, right? To report tax fraud. I'm just not going to do that as an intermediary.
But what you just said, you're telling a person to start reporting it, start declaring all your revenue. What that effectively does is it starts to show a growth in the business.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it even though now they're reporting all the activity, it can still send a bit of an erroneous signal to a buyer because it now indicates growth, which may not actually really be there. I mean, these are all parts of the reasons why it's difficult to do these deals. There's risks in these deals. You don't have 100% transparency or full confidence in everything you look at in these deals. And it adds on to why it really makes sense to invest some time and really learn what you're doing before you jump into one of these things.
Diligence. Yeah. And if you're a savvy business buyer and you notice this pattern of all of a sudden revenues went up 2 years ago, well, what about the expenses? What's the percentage of expenses compared to those revenues? So you could figure that out. But fortunately, we don't see as much of that. When you deal with service businesses or franchise businesses that report their revenue somewhere else, you get less of that hanky-panky going on with the numbers. But there's always an element of that. And we just say, oh, congrats, like you made a little bit extra money there. Let's focus on what could survive diligence, what you could report.
Yeah. What are you seeing going forward? Like, what would be your predictions here, Neal, for 2025? What do you think is going to be happening?
Yeah, so I heard you and Mike talking about interest rates. That was definitely a big thing. And one thing I'm excited about with 2025, and you may have forgotten about all the COVID stuff, but in my world, the look back period's like 3 years. So I'm excited that COVID, even though I feel like it's been done for a while, the PPP money, the EDL infusions, the ERC money, all that stuff that came in, it's kind of dropping off the back end of the look back period.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
That's nice.
You won't have to look at it so hard anymore.
Yeah. So looking back, I think that's kind of an exciting thing. It's still there, but it's less like you got a mulligan in 2020, and then who knows what happened 1 and 2. All the oscillations of after COVID. But 2025, I'm optimistic. Ever since the election, economy's, it was soft going into that. Everyone's like, it was slow leading up to the election, but whether you call it a Trump bump or whatever, it's been, things picked up again. And I know you talked about, what happens with tariffs and there, a lot of things can go wrong, but most of the business owners I'm talking to are very optimistic.
Well, and I think there's reason to be, because I think that, last time Trump was in, he brought in those tax changes that helped a lot of small business owners. I know some of those things like the bonus depreciation are set to unwind.
Yeah.
I'm estimating that he'll want to bring something in that kind of continues some of those advantageous tax policies, because they were so popular, and I think they really were helpful for a lot of business owners, especially where he's trying to foster this, re-onshoring of sort of traditional manufacturing and stuff like that. Um, Manufacturing is expensive, equipment's expensive. Any kind of help that can be done on the tax side to make it easier for people to grow into those things is going to be welcome. And you know, when we were talking about tariffs earlier, one of the things a conversation I was listening to the other day was a guy in the framing industry, and he was saying that there were no suppliers of certain kinds of frame material that he uses in his shop inside the United States. They all come either from Europe. The really nice fancy ones come from Europe. The really cheap ones come from Asia, right? That was basically what he was saying. And he was saying, like, I can't see anybody starting from scratch a startup to make fancy picture frames from scratch.
Wow.
And I don't think that it's really plausible for a lot of people to create, a manufacturing business necessarily from scratch. I think what'll happen is that people that are making certain goods are going to look for the natural extensions into different products that are kind of tangential to what they're making now, where they can kind of like add to their product lines. So someone making maybe door frame moldings or something like that, maybe they start to try to make picture frames. I don't know, but
Yeah.
but a more natural extension. But for a lot of those companies, what it's probably going to mean is the acquisition of additional pieces of equipment, and so I think this whole tax treatment of newly acquired stuff is going to be really important if that's going to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a lot of consolidation that's going on. You guys are talking about private equity is another consolidation, but I could see there's a lot of industries that you just can't start. You can't start from scratch at this point. It's too big to get in as a first mover or source it in the U.S. So it will be interesting to see. I don't know. It's going to be a good year. I'm optimistic for 2025. It's funny. We look back and our deals are pretty consistent. Like we do a deal almost every month. It may be 3 in 1 month and none for a quarter, but at the end of the year, okay, we did another 12 deals. The deal size goes up and down. COVID, it was a really interesting time. Like we were doing bigger deals going into COVID, and then after COVID, deals got smaller. They're building up again. So I don't know what the deal size will be. There's also this notion that the silver tsunami was paused. And I think Mike talks about this. It's unpaused, right? So all those owners that wanted to sell before, I think they're going to be coming back to market and ready to say, okay, I was ready before COVID. Now I'm really ready. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities like that in 2025 because we're back to some sense of normalcy, whatever normal is in the post-COVID.
Do you keep statistics on like the number of inquiries at your office or something like that? Like how many calls and all that kind of stuff?
Buyers, yes. And any intermediary will tell you that it really since COVID, the buyer calls just went out of control. There's more buyers. And I think there was a wake up with COVID. Everything got shook up, and Mark Cuban calls them the wantrepreneurs. They always wanted to buy a business or they wanted to own a business, and then they found themselves unemployed after COVID or some shakeup happened. And they're like, this is a sign. It's time to buy my business.
I think it was just a realization for a lot of people that you only live once, and we better figure out what we want and get to it, because who knows what can interrupt that for us, like this, all the lockdown and everything that happened with COVID.
Yeah. I'd say the buyer activity doubled, maybe tripled. Business owners wanting to sell, it's seasonal, and it'll go periods where our phone doesn't ring at all for feels like days or weeks, and then all of a sudden everybody is ready. And January tends to be a busy time. People get
Yeah.
through the holidays and they're like, I'm not going to do another year of this. People say in beginning of Q4, don't even call me till after the holidays. And they're just burning that candle. When they get through it, they're like, okay, I'm going to think about long-term now.
I've always said that holidays kind of give business owners that little taste of retirement. Like
Yeah.
maybe between Christmas and New Year's, they take those extra couple days off. They get like a week off. It gives them a little sample of what it might be like to be retired. And then they have to get back to the office and get back into it. And they're like, I want that, what I had,
Yeah.
So it gives them a little more motivation to actually pick up the phone and start to make progress on
Yeah.
the whole idea of doing a transaction.
Yeah. Business brokerage also, because I'm with the IBBA, and that's how we met. Thank you for speaking on our podcast. Business brokerage continues to grow as well. Being a part of the IBBA, I'm seeing numbers are swelling with the International Business Brokers Association.
What's the membership up to now?
Just under 3,000, I believe, is where
Okay.
we're closing the year. Great conference, and we're coming back into Orlando. If you're an aspiring business broker, check out the IBBA. We're going to be in Orlando, I believe, in May, maybe March or May, an M month. But it's great to see, and a lot of that has to do with what's happening with the real estate industry, with the NAR lawsuit. There's a lot of changes happening in real estate, so we're seeing a lot of real estate brokers move over into business brokerage. But in some of the
okay, so tell us about that. Give us a little recap, because I heard about the decision.
Yeah.
I heard now that this whole idea of a standard commission and splitting it with the other party, it's all been thrown out the window. People now have to like negotiate and present their fees and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So is it that people want to come over to business brokerage because they feel like it's more like what real estate used to be, simply working with a seller, getting a commission, or what is it that's pushing them over?
I think they're making less money. The easy days, not that it's easy to be a real estate broker, but the golden days of real estate brokerage. Think 2022 in the US in 2022, people were paying 100 over ask, sight unseen. This is very much the residential real estate market. Commercial is pretty different, but real estate agents kind of had this deal in the NAR. I'm a business broker, so I'm going to botch the summary of the NAR settlement here. But Neal's understanding is that real estate brokers kind of had it on lock. You're going to get 6% from the seller. You're going to give 3% or something close to that to the buyer's agent. And I think the intention was the public consumers need a buyer's agent. So let's not encumber them with paying for the buyer's agent. Let's kind of find a way to make it work so the seller agent pays the buyer agent. And that's how it worked for a long time.
At the end of the day, this is a professional service to the buyer that somehow gets wound up in their mortgage.
Yeah.
And instead of the buyer having to have that extra few $1,000s in addition to their down payment to write a check to their professional advisor. So, it's funny how these things evolve, but at the root of it, I think that's the problem is the buyer needs help, but can't pay for it unless it gets wrapped up in the mortgage.
But the buyers do need help. And I think that was the whole point of that. But, what it came down to is you're telling them they have to pay something that they didn't agree to. That's not fair either. So it's been decoupled, or buy side, sell side is decoupled. So it's like, okay, you're going to have to pay for representation on buy side. And so in some markets, my understanding, North Carolina, they always kind of did it separately, but a lot of real estate agents feel like they're not going to make as much money. And so they're seeing that business intermediaries make great commissions. And it's, I'm biased. I am a real estate broker, but a majority of what I do is business brokerage. I think it's more exciting to sell businesses. So it's kind of it's the sexy thing. It's exciting. I call it the redheaded stepchild of real estate. So we're seeing a lot of real estate brokers that are seeing business brokers on deals and saying, hey, I want to do that too. So there's definitely a lot of.
But do you think this is going to be helpful, or because it's hugely different base of knowledge and understanding and skills to be a business broker versus a real estate agent? I'm just worried that all these people are going to come into the industry who are going to be treating it like real estate and not adding value that a good qualified broker, business broker, should be adding to the transaction, as far as setting expectations and helping, the seller understand, what to expect,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff.
Fundamentally, it's a different animal. You start
Yeah.
with confidentiality. My joke is, what if I got the best listing in the world? It's 123 Main Street, but I couldn't tell anybody where it is. Like, my real estate friends would be like, how are you going to do that? So you start with confidentiality, and that's the opposite of how real estate works. And yeah, I am concerned, and it's painfully obvious when we have real estate brokers entering our deals, just because we just do things differently, and there's forms are different, everything. The loans are different, the attorneys are different. But there's enough education out there to learn how to be a business broker, and that's a lot of the work I do with IBBA. Just incredible content. There's business brokers help each other a lot. It's amazing how people want to be business brokers. They call another business broker, and they'll get an education there. That's a lot of what my YouTube channel is about as well. So if people want to take the time to learn it, then it's not a bad thing. Should help, should raise the awareness for business owners that they can have help. A lot of business owners still don't know that they can hire a professional to help them sell a business. I didn't. When I sold my business, I didn't know they existed.
Yeah, I run into this all the time. We have concise advice who's asking, do you have any stories about the sale of a business that use Shopify? Any stories on your end there about Shopify?
I don't. I have a story about Amazon. I had a guy come to me with a business, and 100% of his sales went through Amazon. And I think it's similar to Shopify. Number one, there tend to be different platforms for online businesses. And number two, there's definitely some, think about concentration issues. Could your business, if Shopify made some significant change, what type of risk does that pose to your business? So
Shopify is not a market. So Shopify is not a marketplace like Amazon is. So that seller who is selling on Amazon, they were relying on Amazon to create all the retail traffic.
Yeah.
The difference with Shopify is just a tool for setting up an online store.
I see. Yeah.
You can sign up for Shopify. You can set up a store. I could set up a bookstore, list all the books on the shelf back there
I see.
for sale.
Yeah.
But then the question is, well, who's going to end up on my webpage? Right. So then I've got the problem of how am I going to build the traffic to so with these online retail stores, one of the people I've had on my show quite often, Jared Krause, he talks a lot about online businesses. One of the strategies that those guys look at all the time is if you buy a business maybe that is only selling on Amazon, one of the things they'll want to do is let's build a Shopify store and then let's get traffic on Instagram and other social media platforms so that we're not always relying on Amazon.
Yeah.
And so, what's great about Shopify is that you get great statistics. So if you're going to sell the business, you can give backdoor access to someone to look at everything that's going on. One of the things that can also happen with these online businesses is that you really have to know what you're doing as far as due diligence, because someone who had nefarious intent, for example, could do transactions with their own business.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
In order to juice up the numbers and make the store look like it had more activity or traffic than it really did. I think that was an old trick called, what was it? In the stock market investing, this was a way people, well, I think that maybe it was referred to as painting.
No.
Well, painting the tape, I think is what they called it.
Okay. Yeah.
Where you would have two parties that were linked to you, buying and selling with each other at consistently higher prices.
Yeah.
So that the tape kept recording, the stock market kept recording a higher and higher price for the stock.
Yeah.
In reality, there wasn't such a real demand. It was people you controlled doing transactions at higher prices to manipulate the recording. And it's the same kind of thing that you can do potentially. You really have to know what you're doing.
That's great advice on diligence, and a lot of it does come down to concentration issues, whether it's the vendor or the customer. So, but I think there's online businesses that trade online are definitely highly sought after, and there's more and more buyers for e-commerce type of businesses, whether it's a part of the business or fully in the cloud. I think that's a great business and good multiples there.
Yeah, and of course the big difference is just that an online business potentially has a global buyer market, right?
Yeah.
Versus a retail store, likely the buyer is going to be somebody that lives nearby,
Yeah.
who's going to be close to it. And so just the fact that it's exposed to potentially a global marketplace is going to give so many more buyers. And at the end of the day, if two or more buyers are competing for the business, that's what's going to make the price go up. And to your point about multiples, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the only barrier entries are the technological skills to run these type of online businesses. Not everybody has them.
Yeah, I mean, you you
They're making it
you
easier
can
every day.
you can get plenty of help on a place like Upwork,
Yeah.
like typing some of this stuff in. I I'm I've kind of backtracked in the last few years. I at one time really saw online businesses being kind of different and distinct from brick and mortar businesses, but increasingly I'm just seeing them both as business.
Hmm.
Any kind of brick and mortar local business needs to have some kind of online presence and strategy around that,
Yeah.
just to round out their marketing and sales function. And you know, online businesses like with concise advice, just ask about Shopify. When I look at some of the financial statements of these online retailers that I've seen, um, I'll draw comparisons with mail order catalog businesses from the 1990s.
Mm.
They're essentially the same thing, except instead of a printed catalog people are ordering from, they're looking at a website,
Yeah.
right? But it's the same sort of thing. People place orders, you package stuff up in a box and ship it off to them. They pay you with a credit card. It's an identical business model.
Yeah. It's funny how there's things just kind of iterate. They don't change a whole lot. They're just different things. This is something of a tangent, but I was trying to explain to my wife this. I watched this show called Twit, This Week in Tech with Leo Laporte.
Okay.
Great technologist. Have you ever followed his stuff?
Nope.
He's got a whole podcast. He calls them netcast because he's around before podcast and he was around before Twitter. But anyway, he was like a radio guy that went to TV, and now he's downsized his studio. He had like live studios, and now he just does it from his home. But he's got a whole network, twit.tv. But his son, his name is Hank, started on TikTok. And then he moved to Instagram. Now he's got a cookbook. Now he's got it's called Salt Hank is his handle. Now he's got a new restaurant in New York City. But what I was trying to explain to my wife is it's so interesting to see. Here's an old timer. Leo Laporte's been at it for a while and has seen all of the different iterations of technology, still reporting on the same thing. Now his son is doing the same thing and jumping, trying to stay ahead of that curve. Like TikTok may be turned off. He's already moved his following to Instagram. And I just think that's really fascinating to see it through one person's eyes in the next generation take the baton and run with it. And we're talking
And still very much doing a media driven personality business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find that fascinating. Just the story of one person seeing it through the next. He's doing the same thing his father did in the new media. So whether it's Shopify or Amazon for Business or whatever the next thing is, what do you think about TikTok, by the way? It could go away in a few weeks. Do you think that's going to affect the media landscape?
Well, so every business person has to figure out what their social media or online marketing strategy is going to be. And I don't think it's possible to be on top on every media.
Yeah.
So for example, with my own, my focus is YouTube number one, LinkedIn number two, Twitter number three. Those are mine.
Yeah.
Do I have a Facebook page? I do. What gets put there? Anytime we're using our different posted scheduling or scheduled post tools, if it allows us to share on Facebook, we just do. So I don't spend any time over there. There's
Yeah.
stuff on there. It gets shared there. People can follow there, but I'm not making the same level of investment over there.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm giving you this whole backstory is to tell you that we secured the TikTok handle for myself back years ago, and have never really done anything with it.
Yeah.
Like
But
my assistant made a few efforts at putting up some short reels, but again, they're the same reels that we've posted on Instagram, and they're the same reels that are also our YouTube shorts, and we just shared them over there. And so for me, if TikTok closes, it's not going to mean any great thing. But there are people out there who TikTok was their number one social media channel, and it's going to be earth shattering potentially for their business. Like,
It's a business story there for sure.
yeah, yeah. You know, other things that I question, if users are barred from consuming TikTok in the United States, does that mean creators in the United States can't post? Right? So is it possible for American creators to continue to post onto TikTok
Oh,
and have a global audience?
yeah,
I don't know. Like, there's all kinds of different things you don't know because, of course, TikTok is global, right? And
yeah,
so it could carry on. Like, I mean, there could be, some creator in France who has built a business and carries on, and nothing really happens to that
yeah.
person potentially. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. My big thing, my bit of advice to everybody out there is no matter what social media platform you are on, you need to make a compelling argument to get people on email because
Yeah.
email is the only thing that you absolutely control. And oh, Neal, speaking of email, did you know what I did starting yesterday?
What did you do starting yesterday?
I created a whole new program where people sign up to my email list, Neal. They get a special series of emails that will deliver 7 free gifts over the first few weeks of their membership.
I'm going
I,
to
I
scan
put out
that QR code right now.
you
I hope
should.
everybody does the same.
I put out an email every day. So, for example, earlier today, there was an email announcing today's live stream. But every day I put out emails, and you get to choose what topics you're interested in. There are several different categories you can select. But for new people that sign up, there's 7 free gifts that will be coming out to you over the first couple of weeks. They include things like, here, look, it's hard to produce a show and be in it at the same time. Things like the new second edition of 21 Stupid Things People Do When Trying to Buy a Business. This is one of the free gifts. We've also got my newly published David C. Barnett Small Business and Deal Making Glossary, which is action packed with over 270 deal making terms. PDF of that comes out free as one of the gifts for people that sign up for the email list. So I mean, that's what I'm trying to do to lure people from YouTube and Instagram and everything to get on my email list where I have their email, right? And of course, people can leave whenever they want. There's an unsubscribe button at the bottom of every email. But it's the only way you really have 100% control over um, your lanes of communication, right? There was Lauren Feldman talking about. Well, we were just talking, Lauren, about somebody who was a TV personality who migrated to new media, and it made me think, oh, I got Lauren coming on. We can kind of talk about that because you have had the privilege of migrating across several media over the course of your career too.
I'm still trying. I wish I'd heard the earlier part of your conversation. I might have picked up something that would have helped.
Well, Neal, I don't know if you ever met Lauren. Lauren is the host of the 21 Hats podcast, which is a really fantastic podcast, Lauren. I got to tell you,
Thank
what
you,
I
David.
really like about your content is that you spend all this time talking with real business owners who have all the real challenges, and people are sharing, the pains and the pleasures and the grief and anxiety that they face every day. And it's earlier in today's live stream, we were talking about sort of the hyperbole that can exist online around people, talking about sort of get rich quick aspects of buying a business. And you really get into the heart of the true lived experience of entrepreneurs. Why don't you just take a minute and sort of give us your backstory because you've been telling these stories for a very long time.
Well, the little secret, David, is that unlike you and Neal, I don't really have any areas of expertise. So what I have are questions. You guys have answers. I know how to ask questions. And fortunately, nobody is looking to me for answers to their challenges. But I like to think I am good at finding people who are, living the life, fighting through the challenges, and are transparent enough and open enough and generous enough to share that. So yes, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I had a background in I used to work at magazines when they were a thing. Maybe you've heard of them.
I saw one recently.
Really? Wow. I walked by a magazine stand in a pharmacy the other day, and I saw these publications that I hadn't heard of or thought of in years. It was like, oh, that's how I used to make a living. Wow, what happened to that? So I did that. I worked in some newspapers. I wound up going to Inc. magazine in 2002, in part just because I'd gotten into this thing where I was going to magazines and helping them kind of rethink and redesign and recreate the magazine, which I really enjoyed doing when there were magazines and there was hope that they might have a next life to go on to. But I went to Inc. I knew something about business. I had a degree in business, but I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. And I just fell in love with the topic, with the people I met at the magazine, with the people I met running businesses, that I was either writing about or editing stories about. And I've been doing it ever since. I stayed there for a while. I did the same thing at the New York Times. I did the same thing at Forbes. And I learned a lot. I worked with really smart people. I met a lot of those transparent people who, are willing to share, who are on my podcast and do things now. But I also felt like we were missing something. I felt like, I worked with really smart business journalists, but a lot of them didn't understand why I would be interested in doing what I was doing. To them, all they saw in the term small business was the word small. And they understood that small businesses are important in the aggregate, but why would you care about any one small business? And, that's just not the way I saw it. I thought there were, I met people who just had amazing stories to tell, and I was eager to try to share them. So I left eventually and started my own thing. And still kind of searching for a business model, still trying to figure it out. But every day I get up and I get to make my own mistakes and chart my own course, which I, never got to do working at those big companies. So I'm trying to build something, and hopefully it adds up to something eventually.
Well, small business is the meat of the mountain. Like I always imagine the world of businesses being like a pyramid or a mountain, right? Where the smaller ones are at the lower part, but it's wider at the base. There are more of them, and your publicly traded companies are kind of up at the top. They're very big, but they're very few in number comparatively. And so the small business world is like the biggest part of the universe. I mean, that's where the majority of the audience is and where all the stories are.
And where jobs are created. I mean, it's not, I think that's sometimes misunderstood. I think it's new companies that create jobs, not necessarily small businesses. Some small businesses are not growing and not hiring. But I think you're exactly right. And the other thing I would add to it is I think a lot of great business ideas bubble up from the bottom of that mountain you're describing. I think, there's a lot of creativity there, and people don't appreciate what goes into it. I mean, when I realized when I was at Inc. magazine that it was routine for business owners to use their homes as collateral, I mean, it blew my mind. I mean, I felt like I knew something about business, and I'd been paying attention for a long time. I never knew that. And the really smart journalists that I worked with at Inc. and Forbes and the New York Times, 99% of them didn't realize that either.
Yeah. Earlier, David mentioned that small business is one of the riskiest ventures that someone can get into. And I would, as an intermediary, I would balance that by saying it's one of the more rewarding.
It's both.
As well. It's both. And when I give speaking presentations, I usually open it up and say, hey, I don't know if you're a small business owner in this audience. Not everybody is, but I guarantee somebody that you care about is a small business owner. And they may be ill prepared for their options for exit. And that's why what I'm going to talk about today is extremely, extremely important. So it touches everyone.
You know what else is important, Neal? Hitting the like button. We've got a whole bunch of people in here watching live, but hardly anyone has hit the like button. And if we're going to make this new media stuff work, we all have to get on board with the algorithm and hit that like button. Comments help too. Sorry to cut you off there.
I gotta run. I do have, like Mike, I have a quick plug as well. I mentioned the IBBA, International Business Brokers Association. We have an incredible podcast, and the great David C. Barnett and the great Mike Finger have been featured on 2 of our recent episodes. So I'll make sure and get that in the show notes so you can check out those episodes. They're both really good, really inspiring. Lauren, great to meet you, and happy holidays to both
To
of you.
you too, Neal. Great to meet you.
Neal and I are also working on a fun little bit of content that'll be coming up in the new year too. So we're going to be doing a little bit of an expose and a rundown of some fun businesses that are up for sale. So it will definitely be some interesting content for everyone to tune into.
Well,
Coming
you know,
to you.
I edit a daily email newsletter where I try to highlight the most important news of the day for business owners. And it sounds like you're working on something that I need to know about. So make sure you call it to my attention when it comes out.
I will definitely share it with you, Lauren. No problem at all.
Thanks, gentlemen. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Merry
Neal.
Christmas, Neal. Good to see you. Awesome. Well, I got so many questions that I'd like to talk with you about, Lauren, because I think you do know stuff. I think you are a bit of a specialist. So what I would like to explore, because your content that you create, like you just said, you ask people questions, you listen to the answers, and you share those stories, right? What is going on with the media? Because there's all these new apps now that let you know which media are reporting what and what the political bias of the media is, like if it's right or left wing and stuff like this. What happened in the world of journalism that went from people just reporting stories in the news to people kind of trying to editorialize the stuff they're reporting on?
Well, first of all, there's always been an element of that. I mean, you go back decades, maybe centuries, probably
Okay.
centuries. There's always been an element of that. I mean, even if you just want to go back to like the 40s or 50s, I mean, Time Magazine was a very prominent publication that was widely understood to lean right. The New York Times for a long time has been widely believed to lean left. I'm not sure that's as true as the reputation, but it's certainly true to some extent. So it's always been there. I think it's just part of it. It's just the nature of the times we live in. Obviously, the rise of Fox News took that to a different level back in the 80s and 90s. And now we're at this point where things are just so polarized that everything is looked at in a different way. And then on top of that, you add that it's just been such a difficult environment for media publication, for media entities. And
well, let's talk about that, because you mentioned your business model, and I can certainly appreciate how tough it is for people to make money with news. Like, traditionally, newspaper, magazine, etc., you report a story, people like your publication, they subscribe to it, or it attracts advertisers, right? That brings in the dollars. Today, you could put a ton of work into a story, put that out there, and then it immediately is copied on 101 different platforms. And I don't know if you're aware, but there was recently a big deal with a new law here in Canada that about the republication of news. They wanted Google and Facebook to pay the originating publications who were the sources of news that they were sharing. And Google, I think, made a deal. Facebook opted to simply not reprint news. And so I can't share an article from my local newspaper website onto Facebook. It'll get blocked. It'll say, we're not allowed to publish this, or we've chosen not to publish this, because
you can't even share the link.
you can't share the link. No. And
Wow.
so
I
well,
did not know that.
what happens now is people will do a screen clip, and they'll just do a screen clip and they'll share that on Facebook. So you just see the headline, but you're not clicked through to it. But people will
Interesting.
say, "Oh, did you know this was going on?" But it all has to do with this war over dollars. And it will, there was a certain lobby, I think, from the journalist sector saying, "Hey, we can't make a living because Facebook is collecting ad revenue and sharing our news, and we're not getting part of that revenue, but we did the work." And so I can kind of see it. But is this problem with the economics of media causing sort of a hollowing out of the resources to go and get the news? Like, I imagine there's a lot of newsrooms that are probably very much, a small shadow of what they once were.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's been devastating. You see it mostly at the local level, where local publications have just been devastated, and that's a real problem, because if you live in a city that's it's not New York, where are you going to learn about things that are happening? And it's really been a terrible issue for media companies. There is a bright side to it. It has, with the technology, the fact that you and I can have this conversation here right now has created all sorts of opportunities. So there are people out there addressing this, and I think creating alternative outlets of real value, and that's a great thing. And it's not like those media companies of previous days had it all right. I mean, I remember having conversations back in the 80s with newspaper reporters who would make the argument that, we don't want to compete for readers. Readers have an obligation to read us. It's their civic duty. And, so my point is they brought some of it off.
Point of view.
Well, more widespread than you might guess. And obviously it was not a healthy business belief or strategy. And it worked out precisely the way you would expect. Now, it would be harder to find people making that argument today. But it's, all these things have added up to devastation and opportunity. And you and I are both trying to seize opportunities, and that's a real positive.
Well, the prophet answer man himself, Rocky Lalvani, who was on here earlier, said we are the new media, and I guess that's true. To the point of my question earlier about media bias, I'm biased. Like, I'm here talking about businesses and small business transactions, because that's what my business makes money from. And, I'm pretty forthright about that. Tell us about how you have tried to build your business. What did it start out at, and where have you arrived at now?
In terms of the bias issue, or in terms of?
No, in terms of the monetization of building a business that would create an income for yourself, to make money from doing the work that you do with news and telling stories.
Well, the first thing I should acknowledge is that I am very much an accidental entrepreneur. When I left Forbes, I left to go into partnership with somebody. It was kind of my idea, but it was his money. And I had the very rare situation where I actually left a big secure job to go to a startup, but got a raise to do it, which doesn't usually happen that way.
Yeah, you're right.
But it happened for me, and I probably should have thought this looks too good to be true, because in the end, it turned out it was too good to be true. I partnered with somebody who's a terrific guy. He had a business that served entrepreneurs in a number of different ways, had been thinking about creating a platform just for the entrepreneurs within his ecosystem. And I said, well, wait a second, let's think bigger. Why don't we create the platform for business owners? There's a hole in the market. I've worked at a bunch of prominent media companies that don't understand that this market exists, don't see the business opportunity in it. But that's who your customers already are. We get it. We can build something for them. It'll pay off for you in that it'll attract more people that will use your existing services, but we'll also make money on the platform that we're building.
So you literally were building a media presence so that his business could kind of be the sponsor and benefit from the traffic you were going to generate.
Well, I didn't want it to just be that. I wanted the platform to make money as well, which is where I would make my money.
With other outside advertisers.
Yes.
Okay.
So, that was the idea. And I think we had a really good plan. I wanted it to work for him in part because he was laying out the money. He was doing the investment, and he deserved a return on that, obviously. And I thought, I thought that would work, and we had a real chance to build something. We were, really getting serious about this right at the beginning of 2020. And
Oh,
as you may recall, things changed a couple of months into that. And unfortunately, he had already run into some issues. He had his core business had done really well, and he went out and bought several businesses. And I'm not talking out of school here. He would be the first to tell you he took on some acquisitions that he wasn't quite ready for, and they didn't all go as well as he hoped. And he got into a bit of a cash flow crunch before the pandemic hit, and he really got into a cash flow crunch. So he kept me on for a while. And during that time, I was building the daily email newsletter. I was building the podcast. We had hopes to monetize both of those. But around about, I think, October of 2020, he just said, you know what, I can't keep doing this. I can't invest. I got too many problems in my core businesses. I can't keep putting money into the thing we're doing together. And he was great about it. We parted ways. And he allowed me to just take the things that we had built together and gave me a chance to try to run with them, which is what I've been doing ever since.
okay. And so when I met you for the first time or encountered your content online earlier this year, and so there was the podcast which I subscribed to, and then I started to get daily email. And then at one point there was a change where I had to join a community, I think, to continue getting the email. So tell us about that evolution, because this is pretty recent that some of these changes have happened.
This was this past year has been a big year for me. I've done a number of things that I was hesitant to do, feeling a little bit paralyzed, not sure what the right step would be. And finally this year, in part because I was goaded on by a bunch of those smart entrepreneurs that I hang out with, I just decided I got to start taking some chances and trying some things and see what happens. And some of them have worked, some of them haven't, but I feel really good that I have tried a bunch of things this year. So, I also have a monthly mastermind Zoom call. There are about 35 people who belong to that. We usually get about 20 people, and it's, a group, it's a peer group. People come together, they've gotten to know each other, and they share what's going on. They ask questions. I've built that. I started doing in-person events. It's kind of the same idea as the podcast. It's kind of a 3-day peer group session. We meet in a different city each time. We vote on the questions that we're going to the topics we're going to tackle. We eat good food. We wander around the city. We make connections. And, they've gone, I limit the size so that everybody gets to participate, and no more than 25 people. That's gone well. People pay me, decent money for that. The big change, the one that you're referring to, is this year for the email newsletter. After being told for years, you got to start charging us for this, I bit the bullet and decided to see how many people would actually pay me for it. And I had something like 6,500 subscribers for my daily Substack, which had an healthy open rate of 30% a day. And I was hoping, maybe over the next year, I would get about 1,000 people who would start paying me for it. That hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen certainly within a year. I've got over 200 people who are paying me. I haven't looked lately. So it's another revenue stream. It's helpful, but it hasn't been as successful as I had hoped.
Yeah. And Substack is the way that you're managing it, because they allow for a fairly easy system to manage these subscriptions kind of automatically for you. So you don't have to keep customer roles and charge credit cards or anything like that.
Yes, you're talking about new media. Substack is the perfect example of the direction the world is headed. So many of my colleagues from back in the day at big media companies have gone off and started their own Substack. And some of them do it as kind of a side hustle. Maybe they make a little money, they don't really care, or maybe they're trying stuff out and they're building on it, and maybe someday it becomes the main way they make a living. But initially, if you don't charge anybody for your newsletter, you don't have to pay Substack anything. So for somebody who's just getting started, it's a great way to do a newsletter. And in this world where when it comes to marketing and social media, everything keeps changing. I think the flavor of the moment is newsletters. It's a much better way to reach people, I think, than pay-per-click or, Facebook or a lot of the other options that were really successful for a period of time.
You mean as far as somebody who wants to advertise something, to advertise in a newsletter versus advertising on a Facebook ad?
I think no, I'm
Or
thinking
you,
from the perspective of the media company, in this case, me, trying to reach readers
oh, I see.
who ultimately
Okay.
may allow me to, take on sponsors and will support advertisers.
So instead of, for example, putting your email list on an email marketing provider like MailChimp and then trying to advertise on social media to get subscribers, by being on the Substack platform, there's a certain cross-pollination that happens on the platform itself.
There is, we don't eliminate the use of social media. Certainly, the Substack makes it very easy to share your posts wherever you want to share them, and I still do that. For me, I think LinkedIn is the best place to go for that, and that's where I focus my energy. But Substack is handling a lot of that outreach, whether it's within the Substack existing ecosystem or trying to spread the word beyond it as well. It's taken the place of what I think a lot of larger media entities used to put their energy more into Twitter and Facebook and places like that. And in part because of like the law that you referred to in Canada, even before that law, it wasn't working as well as it did when people first started doing it.
Yeah. And so this year was a big year of change, and you're talking about how quickly things are moving and adapting in the world of media. So then, like you mentioned, you wanted to achieve a certain number of paid Substack subscribers. Um, do you think your cycle of iteration is going to be equally fast? Like at one time, people would put a couple of years of effort into building that subscriber list. Do you think that you will, parry and pivot or make some kind of adjustment in 2025 based on what you've learned so far?
I'm sure I'll make some adjustments. I don't know that I'm not going to give up on the newsletter yet. It hasn't done as well as I hoped. But the people who like it really like it a lot. And I
Yeah.
feel like I haven't, and it's not for everybody. I mean, some people just think, I know where to find the news that I need, and I don't need someone's help. I don't have to pay for it. And I totally respect that. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people, my best customers feel like I spend a lot of time aggregating stuff, finding stuff around in various places on the web, putting it in one place so they don't have to go searching for it. And they can, click open one newsletter, one email, and feel like they know what they need to know that morning. So I feel like there's a potential market for it out there. I don't want to give up until I've, pursued it a little bit more. But in some ways, the podcast has done better. I think I've reached more people there. And, I'm a small operation. I have to figure out where it's best to focus my energy. So you're certainly right. It's something I'm thinking about.
It's interesting because I'm thinking about the city newspaper, the city daily of 30 years ago, right? And I remember when I was a kid, having the local daily newspaper route was really that was like a key to riches, when you were 11 years old or something like that. And one of the keys was that almost every single house got it.
Yep.
Like everybody was subscribing to it. And I'm wondering, about the motivations behind that, right? Because if you ask my mom, why do you get the newspaper? She would say, well, because of all the flyers every Wednesday for grocery shopping. And if you ask my dad, he might give you different answers, but I'm sure there were some people that subscribed because that was the, Facebook marketplace of its day because of the classified ad section. Other people, it was the LinkedIn of its day for as far as job seeking, because that's where all the job ads were posted. It was also part of the entertainment equation because it's where the crossword puzzle was and all that other kind of stuff. Like if you just think about all the different sections that went into that daily newspaper, it was serving such an array of needs and relatively inexpensive, investment from people for people to get that. you could see how it was like like the utility was just so incredibly high, and it's almost like you are selling just one aspect of that, right? This one particular tranche, and you have to compete with all these other media, like Rocky said, all the other media that are being produced by people who are like giving it away for free. I'm almost wondering, amongst the people who really like what you're doing, have you thought of like going to them to find out what exactly is it that they're really where the utility lies?
I have, and in fact, that was one of the reasons I think I had as productive a year as I did. One of the things I started doing this year, and by the way, I mean, one of the most rewarding things of doing this has been the number of smart people who have gotten involved in the community and been an active part of it. And you are a prime example of that. I'm so proud. Everything that you've participated in that we've done, you have brought your particular expertise and your, really smart questions, and you're better at my job while also having an area of expertise. When we do group discussions, you always bring a perspective that really adds something, and that's part of what keeps me going doing this. But what I did this year was to start doing kind of a brainstorming session that we call an entrepreneurial fishbowl. It's something that was created by a facilitator who is part of the 21 Hats community. And we tried it for the first time at my in-person event in Fort Worth in March. And it was the first time I was doing it. And I just, did I lose you? Am I the only one here? Well, I'm going to keep talking in case people are still listening. But David, I hope you're going to come back. Should I keep talking? All right, so I'm going to keep telling this story. I don't know if anybody's listening or not, but we did this brainstorming session, and I decided that I should be the guinea pig and go first. And the way it works is somebody with a challenge offers up what their challenge is to a group of about 25 people. This time in person, we've done it since then virtually. And I offered up the challenge that I needed a business model. I took questions from the group, and then they split up into smaller groups and brainstormed ideas and came back and threw them at me. So it was exactly what you're describing. It was kind of a really smart focus group of people who were familiar with what I was trying to do, who had an opportunity. You're back.
Yes. Hey, listen, this is what media is all about. It's about sudden internet. And there's a blizzard outside right now, so I don't know if they're truck into a internet pole or if we even have internet poles now, but who knows?
David, I didn't know if I was still on when you left.
Yeah, you were.
So I kept talking.
Yeah.
I said all kinds of.
The show must go on.
I said all kinds of really smart stuff. I'm sorry you missed it all.
I'll watch the replay. Sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Well, I was describing, you've been to one of these fish bowls that we did virtually. I was describing the first one. And the first time I did it, we wanted to pick a business owner to articulate a challenge. And I figure, well, this is the first time. It's only fair I should go first. And I said, I need to figure out a business model. And I did it before a group of people who had paid $2,750 to spend 3 days with me at this. Oh, that was very nice of Neal. Thank you, Neal. Who's paid $2,750 to be part of this. So they knew something about 21 Hats and they were rooting for it to succeed. So it was, a great focus group. And I said to them, here's my struggle. I do not have a working business model yet, but I have these revenue streams that I'm trying to build. And and some potential revenue streams that I've been slow to pull the trigger on, and I got to figure out whether I'm going to do that or not. So ask me a bunch of questions and then throw ideas at me. And that's what we did. They asked a lot of smart questions, which really made me think just to begin with. And then they split up into smaller groups, came back with suggestions. And, one of them is, what is wrong with you? Start charging us for this. And I think, like me, they were a little more confident that would result in a, substantial payday. But they also said, there's no guarantee it's going to work, but you need to find out. And I'm really glad that I, tried it.
Have you explored getting sponsors for
sure.
like ads messages?
Yes.
How has that been received? In those conversations?
I haven't put a ton of time into going looking for it because my numbers are still small. I don't have, I don't have the following that I could take to American Express or somebody like that. But there are people for whom, if they got 1 or 2 sales out of it in a year, it would be well worth the investment in sponsor dollars that would be meaningful to me. So I found a handful of people like that. The big one over the past year was the Great Game of Business, which is this organization that
I've heard their spots. Yes. Okay.
Yes. So they've taken a pause. I'm hoping they're going to come back. They had a tough year, like a lot of people too. But they hire out consulting services. So literally, if they get one client out of it, it pays off for them. And I'm hoping that they will remember that and come back and sponsor again. So I haven't gone looking for sponsors aggressively, in part because I feel like that's not the best use of my time. I think I'm a journalist. The best use of my time is creating the best content I can. And my hope was that sponsors would actually, as it grew, as what I was doing grew, they would seek me out. And that has happened. Not enough to, pay all my bills, but it's happened. I've got a couple of new sponsors lined up for 2025. It hasn't started yet, but I think it'll start soon. And I think one of them is going to be joining your show very soon.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I might know who that is.
You do know who that is.
That's awesome. I was actually listening to your latest podcast this morning, and I believe it's a 3-part series. It's like a clip show of little snippets from throughout the year. Is that right?
That's right.
I thought that was a great idea. And, I thought for a minute about me doing something like that. And I realized, oh my God, I don't have the time for that. And I think this really highlights the difference between, you and your background as a journalist and the fact that your full-time business is creating this content versus someone like me who will do this channel as a marketing sort of tool, instrument, asset of my business. But when I really get into how much production and effort can go into this stuff, I realize I don't want to make the investment in time for me to do that. And the clip show I just thought was fantastic because you had all these just really great snippets that were super valuable. What does it look like for you to sort of plan your production for the month? Do you have a methodology behind looking for your stories, or do you go? Because I notice you have the same guests often on the show. Is it simply that you have a regular rhythm with some of those people, and they're kind of helping to contribute to the content of the conversations?
For sure. You're absolutely right. I do have 10 regulars now. I'm adding a new one in January. We've already recorded that podcast. But the idea was, I started doing this in January of 2020, thinking, maybe this will last 5 or 6 months. We'll see what happens. And then we ran into the pandemic. And suddenly the stories of these business owners became a lot more dramatic. When the pandemic hit, it was not at all clear that all of these businesses were going to survive. So it was a very easy decision. I'm not going to go look for other business owners now. People have bought into these narratives. They want to know if they're going to make it or not. I'm going to stick with them. And that kind of, even when the pandemic subsided, that kind of became our thing. These are ongoing stories. People are talking. I found people who are willing to share not just the good news when things work, but the bad news or what they're trying to do, not knowing if in 2 months they're going to have to say, you know what, I invested $100,000 in that marketing campaign and it didn't work. And I can't believe how stupid I was, but this is the mistake I made. They're all willing to do that. So I've stuck with them, and that's the heart of the podcast. I do bring in other people from time to time for just one-on-one conversations, especially if I think they have a particular area of expertise, like you do, that they can share with the listeners. So it's a mix of those things. But you're absolutely right. That's what makes planning easy. And the way it works is on Monday of every week, I send out an email to those 10 people who's available to record at our usual time, which is Thursday at 12 Eastern time. And then depending on who it is, and I also ask them, if you are available, please tell me, is there anything going on that you would like to talk about, a topic you'd like to raise, a transition in what you're doing? And then depending on who it is, I then spend the next, a couple hours, the next couple of days figuring out which topics we're going to focus on, letting them know, and then we record for an hour on Thursdays.
So for someone who's having all these conversations with business owners, and similar to me, I'm talking to business owners all day long too. What do you think are going to be the big trends here coming up for 2025?
I anticipated you're asking that, and I had two reactions. One is, did you do this in 2019? Because if you'd asked me this at the same time in 2019,
this is the 5th annual Christmas Eve special. So in 2019, it was my very first one, and it was all fly by the seat of my pants kind of thing. And I always make the joke that I've told the story many times. There's our next guest, Jackie.
Hello, Jackie.
Hi, Jackie. I've told the story many times that this business, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. I had to try to figure out how I could get a full-time income and get my kids out of daycare after school. So I basically ended up building this business. And my arrangement with my ex, when we got divorced, is we both knew that we didn't want this crazy back and forth flip-flop child schedule with the holidays, because we just knew too many other people that had these schedules going 10 years out in the future with kids on this Christmas, but not on this Christmas and all this kind of thing. And so we just said, you know what, let's create a holiday regimen that we will maintain until the kids are old enough to make their own decisions. And so we did that. And so the regimen has always been that the kids go with their mom on Christmas Eve and spend the evening with her, and they wake up with her on Christmas morning and do their gifts. I collect them sometime on Christmas Day, and the following day, Boxing Day, is a holiday here too. That's when we do Christmas at my house. And we always have the same thing. So if you ask me in June what I'm doing for Christmas, I can describe the schedule to you. Like, I always know. And so like that year, I was sitting at home alone on Christmas Eve with nothing to do. And I said, I'll just do a live stream. And that was the first one. And then I love it. And then all of a sudden I've got now regular guests that are coming back every year. And I like it because it's so casual, and it's always a great conversation. And I always say that this time of year, people are doing road trips or they're traveling and stuff like that. So I might as well create a big 4-hour chunk of content for people to absorb, when they're on a plane or in their car or something like that. And people seem to like it.
Well, I love it. But the thought I had was that if you had asked me in 2019 what I think are the big trends to watch, what's going to happen in the year ahead, I don't think I would have gotten very close. And so I'm acutely aware of that this year, as you're asking me, but I can't remember a time, and I'd love to hear what you guys think of this. I can't remember a time when there were so many huge variables in play that could cut either way. I just, from the whole thing with immigration, if we and mass deportation, are we really going to send millions of people out of this country? And what impact will that have on the economy? With tariffs, are we really going to impose those tariffs? Who knows? And then, there are other things too. I mean, I think I could make an argument to you that this is the golden age of entrepreneurship, that in part because of technology, the fact that that we're all here right now having this conversation in a way we couldn't possibly have done years ago. and that's not even talking about artificial intelligence, the impact that AI is going to make, the things we're going to be able to do. It's just, and the positive impact of that is potentially incredible. I don't know what's going to win. I don't know where this is going, but there's so much at play. That's my thought.
Guys, you know what? I just got a super chat, and I can't. I think this is the second super chat I ever got. So Tigry, thank you very much. No, I can't see the hearts because I use this streaming application, so I'm not actually looking at the platform that you're on YouTube. But thanks for sending the hearts and the $5. I will go spend that at the pub immediately after today's live stream. the well, this has been great, Lauren. Thanks so much for sharing about your business and everything. I am equally curious as you about what next year is going to hold. And you're right, there's 101 different crazy things that could end up happening depending on what gets implemented and how. And I think I was listening to one of your shows the other day where someone was just mentioning, if the undocumented workers are deported, just the shrink in the number of consumers is going to have an impact on the general economic condition. So, yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, it's certainly different because I don't know. Is it supposed to be so easy for someone to get elected and make really huge economy impacting changes at whim? Like, is that the way it's supposed to be?
I think we've kind of fallen into this over the last decade or two. We have this whipsaw environment where one party goes one way, the other party goes the other, and it makes it really hard for business owners to chart a reasonable course because you just don't know what rules and regulations are going to stick and which ones aren't. This one is particularly difficult, I think, because I'm not sure that the most important things that are going to come out of this change in administrations are the things that people were voting for. To some extent, they were voting for a reduction in inflation. And some of these things we're talking about are, if they actually were to take place, will almost certainly cause an increase in inflation. So what are we to make of that, David? You tell me.
Well, it's politics, right? It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to get votes.
Fair enough.
Jackie, welcome. Why don't you take a minute and let everyone know who you are? I know you know Lauren because you appear on his show quite often.
Can I just say that when I was talking about you, David, as being one of those smart people that I'm really proud participates actively in the 21 Hats community, Jackie is most certainly another one of those.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. Hi, Jackie Russo. I'm very excited to be here. Usually Christmas Eve afternoon is kind of a lull for us. The kids nap, we rest up before we head to my in-laws. So I can't imagine a better way to spend the afternoon than chatting with y'all.
Yeah. Well, welcome.
Thanks.
And I was a guest on your show this year. He Said, She Said podcast. Is that what you call it?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. And we were talking about marketing and we were talking about people buying businesses. And, you're also a person who's talking with business owners all the time because you're talking with them about their marketing and their strategy and all that kind of stuff. Look, there's been a trend started here. We got someone saying happy holiday, giving me $20. Now I can afford, more.
You're buying a round.
I'm going to buy, a small one, I guess. But yeah, there you go. Thank you very much for nice advice. I certainly appreciate that. Why don't you tell us what you've seen over the course of the past year amongst your clientele?
Sure.
What were people doing?
I have an interesting range of clientele. So as the co-founder and CEO of Brand Russo, we are a branding agency located in the Southern United States, and we work with primarily B2B clients across the country. Typically what I would consider to be extra small or small medium. So in that 50 to $500 million range is where most of our clients live. They're in manufacturing, industrial, professional services. They all seem, and I would say almost to every one of them, incredibly optimistic about this new year. Because they see opportunities. And so we've been doing a lot of preparation for some big growth plans that these few dozen clients have. Then I have what I would consider the next tier of small businesses, but well established second stage companies, because I do a lot of consulting work through the Edward Lowe Foundation to state economic development departments in about 15 different states. And so
Okay.
they're smaller. They're typically in that $5 to $15 million range, and almost all of them still founder-led, entrepreneurial, and they're super excited. There's a lot of enthusiasm and growth and forward momentum. They all seem to hold back because of the election. Now that the election's over, and I think this would have been no matter who won, they're ready to go. Then I have this third tier through Brand State U that are typically much smaller, 2 to 5 person, maybe 10 people companies, often startups. And they're coming to me because they can't afford an agency like the agency I run, but they want professional guidance and advice and information because they didn't go to school for marketing, or marketing has changed a lot since they were in school. And so
And this
I
is kind of
teach
like
them.
this is kind of a self-serve option for them through
Exactly.
this program.
It's
Okay.
self-paced marketing membership. And so there's monthly courses, there's online strategic boot camp, and ongoing monthly roundtables. But it's, when you need help, you really can't do it on your own, but you can't afford to have somebody do it for you. So you need a guided foray into marketing. They're nervous. That group, every one of them, nervous to spend money, nervous about what's coming next. They don't have necessarily lines of credit and deep savings accounts to lean on. They haven't really diversified a lot yet. And so there's a lot of fear and trepidation. And that's the group I look at most, because that's the group that spends to drive the other's success. That's the group that develops opportunities for hiring. And so that's the one I keep my eye on and think, all right, we need to get them enthusiastic and moving forward for this whole thing to really work.
Okay. And so, I mean, when you describe the status of that third group and how they're kind of afraid to spend money, they don't have a lot of resources. I mean, to me, that's just like an undercapitalized startup. Like that describes
Yes.
a lot of businesses out there. But you're
Yes.
saying that it's the fact that they're not optimistic is what gives you concern.
Right. I feel like, to Lauren's point, this is the golden age of entrepreneurship. And I feel like it has been really since the late teens, as we were able to automate more. Digital technologies have really, even before AI, have allowed us to reach more people easier than ever before. I mean, when I first started my career as a media buyer, we had to buy TV ads to reach people. And so it was
Yeah.
expensive to market. Now marketing is very inexpensive, which is great, but also provides a lot of clutter. And when I see this entrepreneurial wave of startups that happened in 20 and 21 and 22, I thought, boy, this is great. But they were undercapitalized, they were undertrained, they didn't really know what they didn't know. And so I saw a lot of people who were able to kind of figure it out anyway, and a lot who lost. And so I think that pendulum, just like in politics where it swings, the entrepreneurship pendulum swings back, where people aren't maybe risking their houses, putting everything on a credit card, taking big swings because they just don't know what 2025 is going to look like.
So a little bit more apprehension. What
Correct.
what do you think? So in order for somebody to because you're talking with people who've started a lot of these businesses, right? So you're talking about those
Correct.
startup entrepreneurs. When we think about someone doing that, they've got to have optimism. They have to feel like they at least have enough capital or resources to give themselves a little bit of runway. And then what are the other sort of bases that have to be covered? Because I'll tell you, I do occasionally have conversations with people that are looking at starting a business. And the conversations I have with Americans are very different from the conversations I have with anyone else in the world. And it's always around healthcare, right? Because it's almost like this third pillar of the startup equation. And if you're married to someone who's got a really great healthcare plan, then that's kind of like, yay, check the box. But for a lot of other people, like I've had people put a tremendous amount of effort before in planning a business, and at the 11th hour, chicken out because they just don't want to lose their healthcare plan that they get from their employer. Like, what do you find are most people's solutions around that, or is that something that or they've already dealt with that hurdle by the time they're talking to you?
Typically, that's not a conversational topic that we have because I don't know anything about it, and I'm the last person anyone should ask. When we started the agency in 2001, I left a good healthcare plan. My husband was at a different agency. He left a good healthcare plan. And so I was like, I guess we go get one. So we started a Blue Cross small business policy that we have now grandfathered for 24 years. So it's a pretty darn good plan. But it's expensive. But to me, if you're going to go out and start a business, you've got to make sure you're providing for yourself, for your family, and for your employees. And so I've made sure that, we've had a 401k from day one. We've had Blue Cross. We've had and 401k that we did a match, and it's vesting from day one. I'm not going to hold your money for 3 years and hold you hostage. If you want to leave, go. I'll help you get a new job. But while you're here, I want you to be saving because I appreciate compound interest. And that's the extent of my financial advice for today. That's all I know. Compound interest is you just throw it in a conversation and people nod. They're like, ooh, you know what you're talking about. And so, yeah, I think, the importance of insurance really does impact a lot of people's decisions. And we're lucky that we've had this policy and been able to keep it for as long as we have. If I was starting today, it would be intimidating. It's expensive.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I mean, from the people I talk to.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this opportunity to slip out, but I just want to thank you, David. This was a pleasure. I could talk to you guys all day. And I also just want to say you're asking a really important question about healthcare that does not get discussed often enough. But thank you so much for this. Great seeing both of you.
Bye, Lauren.
Merry
Happy
Christmas,
holidays.
Lauren. Happy
Take care,
holidays.
guys. Happy holidays.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And so, like, we're talking about what people are starting to feel. Do you think that the feelings from the smallest businesses potentially could grow, or do you think things are going to get back on track with more optimism?
Well, that's what I really have focused on is how do I help people be more optimistic? What information do they need to have? What resources do they need to tap into? What's amazing to me are the number of people. And so we're based in Louisiana. So a lot of the really small businesses that I work with are also based in Louisiana. And I am always amazed at the resources people don't realize they have that don't cost them anything. So in the state of Louisiana, our Louisiana Economic Development Department, which is a part of the state government, has an entire program that is called, it's a growth leader, but it's got all these different pieces. So there's a CEO roundtable that you could qualify for, and they meet once a month that costs nothing and gives professional guidance and peer-to-peer leadership. There is access to the Edward Lowe Foundation that works with second stage companies and provides consultants in accounting, operations, human resources, and marketing free of charge to the companies. The state picks up the tab. Through the Louisiana Workforce Development Program, which is a fancy word for our for unemployment insurance,
Right.
there is an entire endeavor that they call SBET, Small Business Employee Training, and IWTP, Incumbent Worker Training Program. And both of these programs, each of them, provide $3,000 per employee per year in 100% reimbursable training.
Wow. I love that you're bringing up this topic because these kinds of resources exist all over the place. People
Correct.
just have to learn how to Google for them.
Yep.
So, and here where I live, we've got a couple of organizations like that. I've done some training classes for them, and people have signed up for half day live training classes that I've done here, and they paid like $29 to attend because
Right.
it's like my fee is just covered by the organization. They have some
Right.
kind of minimal cost recovery, but you just have to Google it. I know everywhere, all over the US, the SBA has the SCORE offices, which
Yep.
provide people with some great advice too. But state by state, county by county, and city by city, there are other agencies, offices, etc., that may or may not exist. People should go looking for them.
Right. Absolutely. And to your point, it's region by region. And so that region could be a city, it could be a county, it could be a state. And so I think about our SBDC, the Small Business Development Center. I am paid to teach classes through them. I think about LEDA, which is the Lafayette Economic Development Authority. If you need research for your business and you call them within a day, they can develop entire pieces, I mean, impressive research that would cost a company tens of thousands of dollars to pay for, completely free.
You know what? These types of organizations often also subscribe to paid databases of research.
Yep.
Like you could go online, find some paid think tank resource where they'll sell you a report on your industry for $2,000,
Correct.
and then go do some research and find out, for example, maybe this organization, the
Right.
Lafayette Economic Development Organization, actually subscribes to it, and
Right.
they can go pull the report for you and give it to you for free.
Yeah.
I've seen instances of that before.
Yeah. So
In
to your point,
particular,
Google.
in particular with the if you attended university,
Mhm.
okay, your alma mater's library reference desk,
Oh,
oftentimes you can still access your old university as an alumni. You can access your university's library through the internet now, and you can access paid reference tools that they're subscribing to because you are a member of the university by being an alumni.
mhm.
And so I've had people before who have signed up for, and then for people that have not, often the downtown or central branch of the big public library in big metro cities often similarly have subscriptions to these expensive reference tools as well.
Yep.
And you can often just get a membership card, and then all of a sudden you can sign in through the internet. You don't actually have to go there to get access to some of these resources.
Right. It is amazing to me the amount of information that's available to us. And we could go one step further. LinkedIn has a library of free classes if you want to learn how to do that better. HubSpot, the HubSpot Academy is full of great information. Brand State U, I have free courses and resources for people. Everybody's got something they can give away. And so I think that we should always start with what can I access for free to learn how to do what I'm doing better before I go spend money or hire an expert. And that's at all levels of the size of your company, because why pay for it when it's free?
Yeah. Yeah. It just takes a little bit of Google sleuthing, as it
Yes.
were. Yeah. So what is the most interesting client work that you've done this year? Has been anything exciting that really lit you up from a creative point of view?
Ooh, it's interesting. I have the great fortune of having an incredibly talented team. And so over the years, we've been able to hire really well and train really well. And usually it feels like they're kind of training me because they come in already fully baked and knowing what they're doing. And so I don't have direct contact with clients anymore like I used to. My team is the day to day point people and strategists for the clients, which frees me up to go do fun stuff. And so one of the funnest projects I've been able to work on this year wasn't for a client. It's a new company that I started back in May called Train Yard Advisors, because everything we're talking about right now is about training and people understanding their availability of resources. And sometimes that's internal. And so I've assembled this group of Avengers who will go in and do organizational assessments and do training to help cultures inside companies build. Sometimes it's small teams of 10, sometimes it's large, 1,500 people. But what I realize is you can't always see that forest through the trees. And so it's really helpful to have outside resources come in and help see clearly what's going on and then guide you forward in a path. So that's been a lot of fun. I've done a lot of travel this year. I think when we did our annual Christmas card, we always kind of map out where we've been, sort of like a newsletter. And I think I've been in about 18 different states this year, visiting clients, spending time with them, speaking at conferences. And now that all my kids are out of the house, it's like the golden age.
And do you like the traveling and the public speaking?
Very much. I was a high school debate champion and a college speech and debate champion. And so any chance you're going to put me in front of, 2, 3 people, it doesn't take much. And I'm up at the front with a mic delivering some sort of oratory, or I'll jump right into a Lincoln Douglas debate. I'll start flowing notes, point, counterpoint. I'd like there to be a trophy when it's done. That's kind of how I roll.
I also love to do public presentations in front of
Oh,
people. I think
yes.
it's a lot of fun, especially a crowd of entrepreneurs. And if anyone out there is in the wedding or events industry that wants to actually come and see one of my presentations, I've been invited to come to the Be Sage conference, which is a conference specifically for people in the wedding planning industry. It's going to be held in Cancun. This is in early March. And I believe there are still tickets available for this one at bsageconference.com. And then later in March, I'm going to have a busy March. I'm going to be heading to Cincinnati, and I'm going to be going to the Economy Conference, which is all about the FIRE community. So these are the financial independence retire early people. And that one, I believe, is sold out, but there is a waiting list and there are tickets churning. So it might be harder to get to that one. But those are 2 fun events that I've got lined up for next year that I was excited about that I wanted to share with
Cancun,
everyone.
absolutely.
Yeah, well, you know what that makes me, right? Well, actually, both of them make me an international speaker because I live in Canada. So I guess they make me a NAFTA speaker.
Nice, nice. Well, we do an annual women's summit at sea in September on a Royal Caribbean ship out of Galveston. So that's how I get to claim my international speakership. But for the first time, one of my buddies, Melissa Bowen, who has the Authenticity Center, and so she and I kind of perfectly enmesh this professional and personal development. 2 sides of the same coin, I think, when it comes to building your brand. And so we started doing it a few years ago. Well, we've now been hired to produce a women's summit at sea for a group of women in the legal tech space. And so we'll be sailing out of Port Canaveral in April and heading to the Bahamas. So I'm right there with you on the international travel and speaking.
We have someone who just showed up at the door. Let me introduce Mark.
Hello.
Hey, Mark.
guys.
I don't know.
How's it
Mark?
going?
Have you ever met Jackie?
No,
I have not, and I'm glad you said her name. I was about to say JC. Just going. I'm sure you've gotten that once.
I would have just answered to it, Mark. I don't even correct people anymore.
Yeah.
I nod. I'm like, yes. And then for the rest of our lives, as you and I become best friends, I have to say, AC. And then other people in the room are like, wait, I thought it was Jackie. It's very confusing.
I was very frustrated when I tried to invite Jackie to the show because I kept trying to guess her email in Gmail because we've had an email exchange before, but I knew it was the short form of Jackie, but I kept trying to put JAQI, and of course there was no JAQI person in my email history, so it didn't come up. And then well, eventually I saw you in a Zoom chat and just sent you a message. So yeah.
Once again, Lauren Feldman, good for something.
Yeah.
I was at a restaurant a few weeks ago and they asked me my name for the order. I won't say where because you may have been there, Dave, a new restaurant in town. I said Mark with a C. And now we've all seen the Starbucks meme with Kark or whatever, CARK. But she actually spelled it MARCK, which I've never gotten before. So
interesting.
Mark with a C, and she left the K.
She left the K as well. So you're lucky, Dave. I don't think anyone's going to butcher Dave or David.
No, it's true. But people these days are very sensitive about what they call each other, and so I always get people who are always very calm and will ask me, very kindly in a quiet voice, "Is it Dave or David?" Right? Like I'm going to be deeply offended, and my answer to that is always either. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
just don't call me late for dinner.
That's right. I'll never be late for dinner.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or seconds. Yeah. But hey, that's something I'm overcoming. Yeah, cool. So, and Mark, you've been involved in a lot of different businesses over the course of your career. We've just been talking about marketing, and you are talking with coaches all the time. What's 2024 been like for you?
For me or the coaching world?
Well, I
It's-
guess what are you hearing from the coaching world? Like, and again, like you're talking with people who in turn are spending their time talking with a lot of business
Yeah.
owners. So you've got the potential there to accumulate a lot of different opinions and attitudes and points of view as to how people are feeling.
This may sound similar to what I told you Christmas Eve 2023, because I think the seeds were planted and we started seeing this in 2023. But from speaking with a lot of coaches, people who service coaches, people nowadays are holding on to their wallets a little tighter. Gone are the days where, not saying it doesn't happen, but you get a prospect that you meet in a 15, 20-minute Zoom call, you throw in a $10,000, $15,000 offer, they whip out the credit card and bang. I know it does happen, but people are very skeptical. And with the way that the way that I look at it, it's almost like if you started dating someone who's been in a string of bad relationships where people have always cheated on them or whatever, they carry it into a new relationship. So I've spoken with a number of people who are like, yeah, Mark, I would love to work with you. I had a bad experience with a coach, or, I spent this much on a coach earlier this year. I just can't do it now. So, which at the end of the day, I think that's probably a good thing because it weeds out the bad apples from the industry. Because I think COVID, too many of them got in. Every Tom, Dick, or Harry jumped in. Yeah.
Jackie, I think I heard you made a similar comment on a podcast I was listening to
Yes.
the other day, where you were talking about how people are feeling a little bit burnt by sometimes people in the marketing industry too.
And with good reason. I think it's a miscommunication is really what leads to it. I don't think there's that many bad actors out there, but I think that the business owners don't speak the same language as marketers. So they go out trying to hire, and they think they need a social media agency to solve their problem. Agencies are hungry, so they're going to say yes to any request they get. And we create this gulf in communication. And what they really needed was a strategic plan or a full campaign. And what they get was a tactic, just social media. And
The thing that agency was selling.
Yeah. Well, you don't get what you don't pay for. And so people don't realize why their marketing is failing. And then the circle just keeps going. And so like Mark, we end up getting, being the second wife. And the second wife in life usually gets the older, richer husband. The second wife in business gets the, I don't want to spend any money because somebody already took it all. It's a very different experience.
And what's the divorce rate in second marriages are even higher than the first.
Exactly.
and third and fourth are through the roof.
Well, and then you think about it in agency land, average turnover, I think, is 18 months.
Wow.
Right. I
mean, what's the average tenure of your clients?
We're 6 years. And so I'm honored to throw that statistic around every chance I get, with a few as high as 12, 13 years. But wow, 18 months, that's fast.
Yeah, I suppose when you have been with someone that long, it's more than just a vendor relationship. It's almost like you're an outsourced department of theirs at that point. Yeah, because you have such a institutional knowledge of working together, and I imagine there's relationships between the two organizations at different levels amongst a bunch of different people.
Yeah. Well, and at this point, we know the things that haven't worked. We know all the players. And I think we're able to be a lot more effective because we can really come through and continue to build on what we've been doing. So we're not starting from scratch. We're not trying to understand where they're coming from. We've been there. And so now it's just ever climbing up and up and up in the growth, which makes it very rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I'm going to take this moment to bid my farewell. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
You too.
And,
Merry Christmas to you too.
We'll talk again soon.
Yeah.
Have a great one. Good to see you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
I should have brought my Santa Claus hat. I had it on a call the other night. I did a networking call, but I didn't today. Would have clashed with this. So.
I went to the dollar store to look at Santa hats because I thought I might wear one this year, but they were all too small.
Yes.
And I don't know if it was shrinkflation or all the big ones just got sold before I got there.
I got one from Gray because Gray's been my son. And when he doesn't know, I have a 16-year-old son. He's been wearing one to school, high school every day here in December. And I said, "Where did you get your hat?" Because I couldn't find any. I didn't have any luck. And he said, "Oh, I have an extra one, Dad. I'll lend it to you." But the one he lent me was he said it's crappier quality. He said, "I can't wear this one to school, so you're gonna have to use this one." So that's fine.
Well, you don't want to go to high school wearing the wrong thing.
No.
Because I also have teenagers, and I know all about why the clothes that you choose have to be just the right clothes.
Well, you would know this because your kids are, they're roughly the same age. We've had to allow for an additional 10 minutes of getting ready time in the morning for his hair and stuff, which was never an issue when he was like 6, 8, 10 years old. Now at 16, I'm like looking at the watch. So yeah, I'm getting him up earlier now because I learned the hard way here in grade 11 that they care about their hair and stuff more.
So, but we really should talk business here, because this is a business
No,
show.
let's talk high school fashion trends, hair. Yeah.
What can I share one of the things that have been one of my biggest takeaways from 2024?
Sure.
As important as it is to learn new things, I think it's important to realize at certain points that you need to unlearn things. And so here's one of my key unlearnings of 2024. Area codes, I don't think have a meaning anymore. Like, I'm going to be 50 this year. And growing up here in New Brunswick, we all had 506 numbers. And I know there's a new area code that just got overlaid here recently. And people in Nova Scotia were, 905, and over in Maine, it was, I forget the Maine one, 207. I think Maine is 207. And so you could tell from someone's phone number where they lived, right?
Right.
And even here locally, I remember each town had its own prefix. So the first 3 numbers of the 7 digits meant a certain town or community or area or whatever. And you could see a phone number calling you when we got call display, and you could kind of tell where they were. And then, long distance telephone charges disappeared. And now, basically people have these nationwide free calling plans. And what's happening increasingly is people are moving. And why would you bother changing your phone number? It's the number all your friends have. And so I'm increasingly doing business with people that live here in Moncton that have a Toronto area code. And likewise, when I'm talking with Americans, I'll look up their area code before I talk with them on the phone, for example, and it'll say like Utah, and I'll say, "Oh, are you in Utah?" And they'll be like, "No, I live in Florida." I'm like, and so it was like at a certain point, I just said, "You know what? I need to realize that this area code thing, it just doesn't mean anything anymore."
No. And one thing I've found about Americans, I'm curious if you've noticed this too, they seem to be much more transient than Canadians. So I'll be speaking to someone, I'm like, "Where do you live?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm in wherever, Florida." I'm like, "Oh yeah, so were you born there?" "Oh, no, I'm from Michigan. And then I moved to Austin for a few years. And then I was in California for a year." And then, and they're just kind of moving all over. And that happens a little bit in Canada, but I don't think as much. The US, they seem to be crisscrossing the nation and much more willing to pick up and move to another place for at least a bit of time.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I've noticed it too. And so you're host of the Coaching Jungle, and you've got an enormous Facebook group. How many people are in the Facebook group right now?
We're up. The Coaching Jungle is almost 27,000. So it's like 26,700 or ish. Yeah.
And so a Facebook group of that size, like, what is the level of activity? Like, how often are the people that are members sort of in there being active, doing stuff?
I mean, it fluctuates. I look at the dashboard every so often. You can see active members. It's not 27,000. Sometimes people think, "Oh, Facebook group of 27,000," just like email list. You're never going to get 100% of people opening it up. I will say Facebook group engagement has been more challenging versus, say, 5 years ago. Facebook has really throttled it. They were supposed to invest a lot in groups. They bought Super Bowl ads, and that was going to be the next thing. And I think they've really dropped the ball a bit on it. So we've had to do some different things to make sure we keep engagement going. And it starts with the group owner. If you're not willing to be active in your own group, why should anyone else? And, I introduced a few things, as a VIP perk this year and stuff like that, which has helped. But it's not as simple. Like, there's a lot of people who have 5,000 person group, 10,000 person groups that just aren't monetizing it. They're dead. So it takes more than just opening a group up and growing it.
Yeah, and you're one of the few people that I know personally who has monetized a Facebook group, because and not through charging membership fees, but you introduced this VIP program where people who are obtained this VIP membership by paying you some money, we're able to then share some more commercially oriented posts inside the group. And how did it change the group? I mean, I can imagine all people having, fears of negative effects, from that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But what was the ultimate result?
Well, I should let people know the Cliff's Notes what the VIP is. I say it stands for very important poster, So late May of this year, I rolled it out. And basically with the VIP perk, we're very strict, not allowing any promotion on the group wall. And we just delete, we'll boot people if they're frequent offenders and so on. With the VIP perk, those members will pay a low fee, and then they get to do one promotional post on the group wall every week. But there's other perks as well. They get expert designation in the group. We've got a private VIP group. We've got 75 VIPs. So we do regular networking meetings. Business is being thrown around there. People hiring each other, doing JVs, collaborations, and so on. And then there's other perks as well with it. So that's what the VIP is. And I rolled it out at $79 a month. It's now $97 a month, but it's $997 a year. We're doing a holiday special where it's $497, so $500. It works out to like $41 a month. Yeah.
I mean, this is really interesting because it ties in with the conversation I was having with Lauren Feldman earlier about media, right? And so, we were talking about the newspaper of 30 years ago and stuff like that. It's almost like the community aspect and the learning opportunity because of the content and the postings and the comments, et cetera, of this group. It's almost like people tolerate the presence of advertisements, just like we would always, have ads in the newspaper kind of thing, because what they're looking to get out of being a part of that group holds tremendous value for them.
Yeah. Well, to answer your previous question, the fear when I first rolled it out, I had a few people, oh, gee, I don't like this. It's going to change the vibe of the group, all this other stuff. And knock on wood, it's been pretty good. Now, I'm sure there's been some people that may have left. But with the VIPs, I don't recommend that they just go in there and just bang straight sell with all theirs. Like I think any social media you're doing, that you want to weave in value, infotainment and stuff like that as well. It's funny, the people who complained about it have never paid me a penny, nor would they ever probably, So, okay, that's fine if they want to leave. A few of the people, two I know, told me not to do the VIP. They're good community members. Like I think that's a mistake, Mark, or whatever. They're now in the VIP and they're getting business from it because I just got testimonials from each of them, which I'm sprinkling out this month. So they both have seen, oh, gee, this is actually really good with it. So it's not a case where every post on the wall is now a promotional post. There's enough other posts and things that it's going to be, a good mix that's in there. So I'm very happy that I did it. And it's an interesting option. If you have a Facebook group of 1,000, it's probably not going to really fly. But if you have a large group, it could be a potential monetization tool.
And this is an offshoot of the fact that you have a podcast, Natural Born Coaches. And so you were building an audience over the course of time with the podcast, inviting people to join your email list and as well as this Facebook group, correct?
Yeah, the podcast is a big part of it. We just crossed 900 episodes last week, so we're 901 now. And it's interesting. It's like a whole ecosystem. The podcast helps grow the Facebook group, which helps grow the email list, and they all help kind of grow each other. So it's interesting if I get a new, say, partner, new business, and I'll be like, hey, how did you find out about this offer? They're like, well, I'm on your email list, but then I also saw you talk about it in the Facebook group. And I think you mentioned on the podcast, is there an ad on there or whatever? So it's hard to say, oh, they came directly from X because they've been hearing X, Y, and Z. And I think in this noisy marketplace, you almost have to do that. You can't rely on just one thing because if they miss it, a good example is with, I know you're a daily email guy. I'm on your list too. And we're both, Ben Settle type daily email fans. I know a few of my clients in the past.
And did you know I'm giving away 7 free gifts to everyone who joins my email list now, Mark?
Good job. Good way to work it in. We didn't plan that, but that's good.
David C Barnett list.com, everybody, and you will get 7 free gifts.
Well, one of my clients sent great emails out every Sunday. She put a ton of time and energy in. They're probably 2,000 words, like just a lot of stuff. And I try to suggest to her to split them up because the problem is if you put all this energy into one email for the week, someone misses it on Sunday, you're not going to, get the results you want. Why not split that up into 7 emails for the week, and then you have a better chance of reaching those eyeballs.
It's absolutely true. And, as far as I'm concerned, the real reason why you want to create that email list is just because it's about controlling contact, right? I mean, all kinds of people subscribe to my YouTube channel, but there's like 45,000 subscribers, but most of my YouTube videos get eventually after a few weeks, they creep up around 1,000.
Yeah.
So obviously the vast majority of people that are subscribed are not watching every video.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, it's whatever people are looking at when they interact with the YouTube, landing page or whatever. But with email, when I send out my email to my subscribers, hundreds of people that day will watch the new video. And there's no question that the majority of the people watching the new video are doing so because they got an email from me saying, hey, there's this new video you might like. And they just click the link and they, go over and watch it. So it's powerful for just reinforcing the relationship and letting people know what's going on and all that kind of stuff.
Someone made a really good point this week, and it wasn't me. I would love to take credit for it. It was Jenna Faith, because I was listening to her talk about it. And I hadn't thought of it this way before, but the difference between social media and email is that email people expect to be sold to. If you look at your inbox, the lists that you're on and stuff, there's offers in pretty much every email, or there should be if the people are doing it right. They should be making offers. Social media is it's supposed to be social, right? So people aren't connecting with you on Facebook or wherever with the intent of being sold to. In fact, they're probably trying to sell you on their stuff as well. So it's more of a muddied water on social media, and the expectation is different. Some people are on social media to socialize or to see funny memes or to see pictures of friends and their kids, versus email. It's much more transactional. People are willing to open their wallets easier with email. I think ideally you should combine the two of them and have them both working, but that's a really key difference between the two.
Now, so let's lead this into a conversation about your industry, because you said it, just a few minutes ago, that there seems to be less of a market for higher ticket services being sold to people. What are you seeing as far as people who want to enter the coaching industry? Are still as many new people looking at this as a prospective opportunity?
So I'll put an asterisk. I don't want to say that, it's high tickets dead and stuff, because there are people that are investing a lot of money, and I'm careful because I don't want to discourage anyone who wants to get in and wants to charge that if they're offering something good. I'm just saying it's a little different than COVID time. The stat that I heard during COVID was that the coaching industry grew by 3x during the COVID years. So there's all this flood of new people in there because they're like, oh, wow.
And why do you think it is? Do you think it's because conceptually it's a fairly easy business for someone to start?
Well, that's part of it. The hurdle's so low, right? You spend $15 on a domain, a couple free social media accounts, and bang, you're off to the races. I think it was a mix of things during COVID. People were suddenly home and they liked it. They weren't in at the office, so they were playing around with stuff, probably besides their work responsibilities or whatever. Or they wanted to get an exit plan to get away from when things were open back up with the office. They also had, I say free government money. There's never free government money during COVID, right? But they were getting this money, and that a lot of people bought courses with the money that government was throwing at them with it, and they were a little more willing to spend it there. So there's been a bit more of a correction now. And like we talked about when Jackie was on, the industry, the prospects are more educated. It's a lot like real estate, as we've talked about in past years. I was in real estate for 10 years. And when I was in real estate, this was a stone ages. Our MLS listings were on stone tablets, and we used chiseled stuff in them. Wasn't that bad, but my first...
I remember the big coil bound books that were printed off a
Yes.
photocopier
So
every
if
week.
you were buying a house, you would have to reach me. You would have to page me my first year in the business because I started in 2000, and I used to carry a whole bunch of quarters in my car, and then I'd have to find a gas station if I got a page. Oh, here's Dave, my client, and I'd have to pull in. That sounds crazy. Cell phones were started to be in use the next year or whatever. But what used to happen if you want to buy a house, Dave, you'd be like, "Hey, Mark, I'm looking for a house on the west side of town between this price point or whatever." You'd have to come into the office. I would take that MLS book you're talking about, and I would photocopy, each page. I'd take 20 minutes photocopying and putting it into an envelope or whatever. Now in 2024, I won't say that the buyers, now I haven't been in real estate for years, but I know some people in it. The buyers, if they aren't as educated as the agents, because they're not doing it for their livelihood, but they are way more educated than back in the day because they know with the apps on their phone and everything else, and they know what all the houses are selling for, and they know about, there's a lot less of a gap between the two. And I think it's the same way in a lot of ways with the coaching industry as well, is people are much more educated coming into it. They're looking to hire a coach, which is good at the end of the day.
Yeah, cool. Well, and so in general, though, what do you think the themes will be for 2025 across the board?
Tariffs. No, I'm just joking.
Really?
I
thought you were going to say New Brunswick will become the 54th state.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we're. I heard someone say if Trump buys Greenland, it's going to be called Magadonia. I think they said was they're going to call it or something.
I just saw all these people posting, when the joke was made in Florida about Canada becoming the 51st state. I just said that's ridiculous. Each province would be a state. Come on.
Yes. One thing I will say to go the other way is, I know this is maybe a little contrarian. We may have talked about last year. Some people talked about AI, of course. I'm not saying AI isn't going to be important, but I don't think it's the business saver that so many coaches thought it would be. Because when it was starting to get big, a lot of coaches thought, "Oh my God, this is great. I hate creating content. I'll just feed it into this AI and it'll just, spit out." And I can tell, and everyone can tell, say in my Facebook group, if someone's putting up an AI generated post, they can smell it a mile away. So I think AI was a little bit, people were a little too bullish on it as it was coming up. I think it's going to be an important tool, but not the savior that everyone thought.
I'll tell you what I've had some interesting success with when it comes to AI. Not in creating content, but for example, for that muse work, like I'll sometimes ask it, create a list of 30 items, 30, bullet points about this topic. And it just helped me organize my thoughts. But I've also had great success in using it, for example, taking an hour and a half recording that I've made, and I'll use Otter to turn it into a transcript, and I'll feed that into ChatGTP and say, turn this into a case study. And it'll create like a 3 or 4 page case study, and it'll be really great and not necessarily sort of that, how you get this circular flowery language that doesn't really mean much a lot of the time from AI. I find I don't get it when I do this because it's actually working with something. It's taking a source document and it's trying to whittle it down. And I find the output is pretty good when I do that.
Yeah. I do like the Zoom AI meeting summary. That's made it much easier for podcast show notes and stuff. Because sometimes if I haven't listened to an episode, if we recorded me and you 2 months ago and then it's being released, I would have to re-listen to it, take some notes or whatever. Now it's just grab the meeting summary and it's bang on pretty much. Not as an exact transcript, but it's like Mark and Dave talked about this, and they talked about this, and Dave talked about this, and that part it's been really good for. But I think you're right. If it's creating content completely from scratch, that's where it's has issues. And of course, I always laugh at the AI pictures. They can't seem to get fingers right. It's like 6 or 8 fingers, and they have some issues there or whatever. But for content, I mean, it's going to be improved when we talk next year at this time. But right now, it's not quite there. And I think coaches got a little spoiled or a little too optimistic thinking AI was going to do all their content creation. Oh, the other one I love, Opus Clip too. I got to say, I don't know.
I used AI to make an image for my new glossary cover. This is it right here.
Yeah.
And so, basically the prompt that I gave it said, imagine a small business owner in a business that's chaotic and out of control, like it's an action movie. And it created this, which is like a factory with office equipment.
Yeah.
There was explosions and the guys running.
That's a pretty good
But
picture.
it's a really great picture. But if you zoom in really
The
closely
fingers.
on the guy's mouth,
Oh,
I don't know if I can zoom. Can I
yeah.
zoom in? No, I can't. I can't zoom in here. But it's just kind of like his mouth and nose kind of like smudged together. And
Okay.
you have to really look closely to see it. But his face just isn't quite right. But I
Yeah.
was so impressed with the image overall. I'm like, yeah, that's the one
Just
I'm
go
going
with
to use.
it. Yeah, it looks great. And then text, it doesn't seem to do really well with text in an image. It's
No.
always screwed up.
I've asked it to create a book cover with a certain title, and it can't get the text right. It'll get 80% of the letters correct, but it I don't know. It just can't seem to interpret
Yeah.
the image with the data of the word. I don't know. I don't get it.
The tool I love is Opus Clip, and I don't know if you've used it for like $20 a month. That gives you enough credits. So for my podcast, it takes 2 minutes. I just give the YouTube link with the video, and it spits out like 15 or 20 short form videos, and they're usually 30 seconds to 2 minutes ish. And yeah, that's been excellent because before I used to hire out, I had a guy in India that would charge me to do 10 bundles of 10, and it would take a bit of time. Now it takes just minutes.
And so, and are they relevant?
Yeah, I was surprised. They're really good. They're good at picking. They have a score out of 100. So the top one might be like 98 relevancy, and it's got different criteria. And the next one might be 96, 94, and so on. So I was very happy with that. And then you could choose the text, the captions that you have on there. You could take out emojis. I'm not a big emoji guy. Like sometimes these ones, like every word's got the emoji. Like if you're saying, I think, that it shows like a brain comes up, or you got to fight for your coaching fees. It's got like a sword and then money. And I'm not into that, but I like the caption. And then you can also remove the caption for the filler words. So if you say or something like that, you can at least remove the caption for it.
Well, that's cool. I'm going to check that out because I know that it's a lot of work on our end to create like little shorts and stuff like that. And when I think about like a recording like today's live stream, we're on 3.25 hours right now.
Cool.
It would be a lot of work to just go through this manually and try to clip out some interesting bits.
I would check it out. And this shows how this isn't to knock video editors, but I imagine a lot of them have gotten out of that side of it because I know that there were lots that were selling, $2,000 a month packages, right, for all this video stuff. And I'm sure they're great at what they do. But if you're competing against $20 a month for an Opus Clip subscription, that's tough to compete with.
Well, I mean, ideally, like if I had a video editing business and that's what I was doing, what I would be doing is saying, well, how can I use the Opus Clip tool, for example, and then create these new offerings that are either, delivering more value to the client, and maybe I come up with a different package where the client gets more, but maybe it's less than the 2,000, and I can handle more clients with my existing resources because the AI tool is enhancing. Like, AI has been around for a long time. Like people don't realize this. It's just this generative stuff that's new. But back when I was working for American Express, we had some pretty cool AI that was constantly watching the charges, right?
Oh, wow.
And it would be looking for something that was out of pattern because it's trying to identify if maybe your card was stolen or something like that. And it was really powerful. Like it would flag things, and I just as a card holder. I get little app notifications on my phone. If I buy something that I've never bought before, or if I, use the card in a new and different way that I've never used before, like a thing will come up on my phone. It'll be like, are you in this place trying to buy something?
Yeah.
And like, so the AI has been around, but I think the way that small business is going to take advantage of AI is through things like this application that you're talking about. It's through the enhancement of everyday things. Like I know you do a lot of writing, and I do too. What do you think of the little predictive text that appears like in Word or Google Docs, like kind of predicting what you want to write? Do you find it helpful?
Not for me. I mean, it's good in some ways with emails that you could just hit tab. Let me know if, and then you have any questions. It's finishing, then hit tab. I like that, but maybe I'm a little old school when it comes to writing. I like going, straight without any of that stuff. But maybe that's just me.
Well, at first I was annoyed by it, and now I've learned to live with it. I guess I've learned to ignore it when it's off. And to your point, I think it's off more than half the time with me.
Mm.
And so I guess that just kind of reveals the shortcoming of the AI. Like, uh, obviously, it thinks the sentence is going in a certain way, and maybe that's based on the writing of all the millions of people it's analyzing across all the user base of the software. But it just surprises me how it is not that accurate with what my intention is when I'm writing.
Yeah, you know what I'm seeing a trend in the coaching world lately is that people are incorporating AI to have a mini Dave on their website where they put all of your writings and everything and shove it in there, and then people can ask questions and answer them. And I don't know, for me, when I'm dealing with tech support that's AI, like I'm like, can I talk to a real person, please? And then they're like, we're going around in circles. I'm like, real person, real person. So for me, I had someone reach out and want to have an AI mark on naturalborncoaches.com, and they were going to take all the emails and all my courses and everything. I'm like, no, thanks. I'm good with that. Not at this point.
I actually found out earlier this week. Here it is, right here. Let me share my screen. I'm gonna share this. Share screen. Share this window. So I found out that. Oops. Add to stage. I don't know if people can read that. It might be too small. I found out that ChatGTP had read one of my books, Invest Local. So I shared this tweet over on X. I put, today I learned that ChatGPT has read my book, Invest Local. It gave me 4.5 out of 5 stars. And here's a little snippet of what it said about the book. It said, approachable writing style. David Barnett's straightforward tone and conversational approach make complex concepts easy to understand, even for those without a finance background. And I thought, wow, that's kind of weird. And I was like, who on earth fed my copywritten book into this large language model? Then I got, kind of concerned. But it's consuming the world. I mean, it's reading everything, isn't it?
Well, and a lot of authors are having issues because publishing houses and different things are feeding their stuff into the machine. And well, look at actors too now. There's a lot of them worried that their likeness are going to be used years later, right? Or there's not going to be need for real people because it'll all be Disney or whoever will be just using the CGI type people in there. But at least they gave you 4.5 stars. I'd be annoyed if they gave me 2 stars or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you ask Santa Claus for Christmas this year?
2 days off. You know me, I don't like to sit still too much. So I had a call yesterday, including this 2 calls today, taking tomorrow and Boxing Day off. And then Friday, I've got 4 calls. So I'll have 2 days just so I don't go too stir crazy. I'm back at it. But what did I ask for? I don't know.
I once wrote an email about the power of statutory holidays. And I said, one of the reasons why they're so important is that if everybody's off, for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, it means that entrepreneurs can take the day off too.
Well, a few months ago, Meta went down. So Facebook was down for like just an hour or whatever. And everyone was freaking out, of course. Like I was going to Down Detector to punch in. And ironically, just for what this goes to what you just said, I was able to relax because no one else was on Facebook. And I find that's where Christmas Day and the day after, whatever, it's a little easier to relax because it's not like I'm missing a whole lot. But I had a real tough time. We probably talked about this last year in the Christmas Eve special. I have a tough time sitting down and relaxing. I can sit down, read a book. I can, an hour, 2 hours or whatever. But then the little voice in my head's like, now I'll get back to work. When I get back to work, it's much easier for Christmas. But even when I was in real estate, I found it tough because back then it was all done like phone calls, right? I was getting 300 calls a day. I was dealing with, phantom ringing. May not be a thing now where people don't use their phones for talking, but it's when you think your phone's buzzing and vibrating when it's not. So I would put it in the drawer and I could swear I heard it ringing and it wasn't ringing. But I'm like, what the heck am I going to do with myself? Because I'm used to hundreds of calls a day.
Yeah, there's definitely been a culture change. I remember my first sales job with the Yellow Pages. I was making 100 calls a day, to have 10 conversations and try to get, 3 or 4 of the ads taken care of for whatever edition of the phone book I was working on back then. And just the volume, and I remember that there was never an end to the work, because the accounts that were assigned to us were the accounts of people who habitually were buying ads. So we were only really calling like those sort of warm accounts, right? And I remember one of my first managers told me, they said, don't ever worry about running out of leads. Get through your stack as fast as you can. There's always more cards. So what we used to call them, cards. Yeah. And I remember there were several times in that career where I finished all of my assignment and I'm like, give me more. And you would just be handed like 100 more of these accounts. And many of them hadn't been called in years. And they were such golden opportunities, because a lot of these were businesses that had never bought any Yellow Page ads for 10 years or more. That's how they ended up in the cold stack. And what would have happened is, in the interim, maybe the businesses got new owners, or the business even was just handed down, to a child from their parents. And then all of a sudden there's someone new who's receptive to having a conversation and maybe is open to investing, who hasn't had the chance because nobody's been calling them. And I remember uncovering all kinds of fabulous opportunities in those cold stacks. And to your point, it was just grinding. It was just call after call after call after call all day long.
Yeah, that's smart, because when I got going in real estate, I would call a minimum 20 expired listings a day. So expired being a house that had been on the market, didn't sell, came off. And that wasn't anything new, because a lot of agents would call expireds, but they would focus on the ones that just expired in the last few days or the last week. I would go back like 10 years and work through there, or 5 years, and when everyone forgot about them. Now, some of them had sold privately or had sold elsewhere, whatever, and that's fine. But I got so much business from those expired listings. I didn't even worry about the newly fresh expireds. I went way back, and no one else, there's no competition there.
Yeah. Well, I got some bad news. You want to know what the bad news is?
Sure.
I got a text message from Rick. He won't be able to join us this year.
Ah, geez.
So, and it's too bad, because last year we learned about his school cafeteria business.
That's right.
And there's a huge new development coming, because we got a new government here in New Brunswick that is making some big changes to school cafeteria policies. And I'm going to let that unfold and find out what happens, because I think it could be very exciting for.
What are they taxing apples?
No, there's the rumor is they're going to a pay what you can model, which I don't know what that means, but it could devolve very quickly into free food, I guess. We'll see what happens, but I want to let that unfold, and I'll get Rick to come back maybe on a live stream and talk to us about how it's impacted his business. But
yeah,
he might be having some big changes in that business. It should be exciting to learn about.
Yeah, I learned a lot last year from that, even though it has nothing to do with coaching. But it was interesting to hear him talking about all that change. So yes, I'll have to tune in when you talk to him. Yeah.
Well, it was good to see you, Mark. And it was good to see everyone that stopped by here today. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Mike Finger and Rocky Lalvani. Neal Isaacs came by. Lauren Feldman came by. Jackie Russo, Mark, and all the people that came in and dropped in and said hello and left messages in the chat. Thank you very much. And hey, thanks for the super chats. I got super chats today.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I know.
Are you retiring?
Well, I'm not going to retire, but maybe I'll retire. I'll retire to the pub and have a beer after this before they close, because obviously it's Christmas Eve. The places are closing early.
And it's messy out today. I was just out a little while ago, so careful.
It is. I've seen the snowfall as I've been on here all afternoon, so maybe I'll do a quick shovel of the driveway before I go out there.
Well, thank you for the invite. It's been fun the last 5 years, I think.
Yeah. No, it's good to see you, man. And let's get together over the holidays. We'll grab a drink or something.
Sounds like a plan. Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Mark. Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone who came today, and looking forward to creating lots of wonderful content for you next year in 2025. I've got a whole list of videos that I'm about to record, and there's also going to be a great video coming out tomorrow for Christmas Day. So you won't want to miss that one. It's a very special video that's going to have something that will only be lasting a couple of days. So if you want like Christmas gifts, make sure you watch tomorrow morning's video sometime tomorrow. And then I've got a really great one coming out New Year's Day as well. It's already been recorded. And with that, I'll say thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you next time. So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I've prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.